I woke up in a world I knew all too well, but something was very wrong. It started with a swirling mass of gas hidden deep within a mountain range in Teyvat. One moment the gas was pure white, the next it shifted to a deep, void-like black. Even the sky above reacted to my presence, flickering between light and darkness as golden lotuses bloomed across the landscape. A divine aura filled the air, celebrating a birth that shouldn't have been possible. I was confused. I remembered playing Genshin Impact just moments ago. But instead of sitting in my room, I had reincarnated as a literal cloud of gas. I thought about how I ended up here. My last memory was shouting at my screen, promising 50 years of my life for a single Zhongli pull. Then, I saw it, 6 gold lights in 110 pull. I guess my luck was so good it actually killed me. Those 6 gold pulls must have cost me at least 300 years of lifespan. I wanted to grimace, but I didn't even have a mouth. Suddenly, a mechanical voice echoed in my mind. A system was asking to bind with me. It called itself the strongest demon god system. I realized then that I wasn't just a cloud of gas. I was a demon god in the world of Teyvat. But what kind of god starts out as a floating mist? I couldn't even move. I accepted the binding immediately. If I was going to be stuck here, I needed help. The system screen popped up before my eyes. My status read, formed by the yin and yang of heaven and earth. Identity, demon god Morpheus. Birth progress, 94%. Estimated time until birth, 300 years. 300 years? I wanted to cry. I was really paying back that debt for the 6 gold pulls. But then, the system offered me a beginner's gift pack. I opened it and received a wisp of creation chi. Using it would allow me to be born early. I didn't hesitate. As the energy merged with my gaseous form, a wave of heat washed over me. It felt like a fire was burning in my core. I thought of all the characters I wanted to meet. Raiden, Ningguang, Eula, and then my consciousness faded into darkness. Outside, the world went wild. Purple mist surged, and the yin and yang gases formed a massive taiji diagram in the sky. Thunder roared as a human figure finally took shape. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing on my own 2 feet. I looked like a young man in his late teens with long, ink-black hair and eyes that looked like a midnight sky. I was tall, dressed in white and black robes, with a taiji symbol hanging at my waist like a vision. I took a deep breath. The smell of the grass and the feeling of the breeze were incredible. I finally understood how Aztaha felt about having eyes. I checked my stats again. My name was Bai, and my age was listed as 4,000 years. I had the power of space manipulation, flight, and the dual authority of yin and yang. Yang could heal and purify, while yin could destroy and curse. I felt like I could shatter a mountain with a single punch. To test my power, I summoned 2 avatars, one black-clad and cold, the other white-clad and gentle. They were extensions of myself, each holding half my power. I looked at them and couldn't help but smirk. I was seriously handsome. I decided to test my healing. I burned a patch of grass to ash and then infused it with yang energy. Like time reversing, the ash vanished, and the green blades sprouted back instantly. It was powerful, but I could feel the cost. Healing another god would probably put me to sleep for centuries. I flew into the air to see where I was. In the distance, I saw a massive flood. A creature resembling a Qilin was carrying people on its back, flanked by 2 giant cranes. My heart skipped a beat. This was the migration from Gili Assembly to Liyue Harbor. I was in Liyue thousands of years in the past. Old friend, I haven't seen you before, a deep, steady voice said from behind me. I spun around, my heart racing. I hadn't sensed anyone approaching. Standing there in the sky was a man who radiated majesty and calm. He wore a regal outfit that looked incredibly sharp. It was Morix, the Geo Archon himself. Do not be nervous, Morix said, looking at me with curiosity. I am merely curious. We are not enemies. I stared at him, my mind screaming. This was the man who technically cost me my life. Morix noted my strange expression and introduced himself, sensing that my power was pure and that I wasn't like the other gods fighting in the war. I was just born, I replied, trying to sound dignified. I am a god born from the yin and yang of the world. I looked at him, and a bold, reckless idea formed in my head. I wanted to know how I stacked up against the strongest of the seven. I've just entered this world and don't know the extent of my strength, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. Would you be willing to spar with me? I was terrified, but I had to know. Even if he accidentally swatted me like a fly, I had to try. The power of a god is immense. Even the weakest among them can reshape the very landscape of the world. Morix looked at me and smiled, his expression calm and welcoming. He told me we could spar so I could get a better handle on my newfound abilities. My name is Chiu Bai, I said, bowing my head slightly to show respect, but you can call me Murexius. Morix, he replied simply. I didn't waste any time. My expression shifted, and the Taiji symbol at my waist began to glow with a brilliant light. A sword materialized in my hand. I swung it with everything I had, sending a terrifying wave of black and white energy screaming toward him. The impact sounded like a mountain exploding. The clouds above us were torn apart by the shock wave, and the grass on the ground far below was flattened by the sheer pressure. When the smoke cleared, Morix was standing there in the sky, completely untouched. He hadn't moved an inch. I gripped my sword tighter, my brow furrowed. I guessed the smoke, but no damage rule really did apply to the strong. Your strength is impressive, Morix said, his voice steady. You are far more powerful than many of the gods I have encountered. I noticed a small crack in the stone shield surrounding him. He wasn't invincible, but he was close. Friend, he said, it is my turn. He raised his hand, and a spear made of pure golden rock appeared out of thin air. He tossed it toward me. It looked like a casual throw, but the spear moved with the speed of a falling star. I panicked. I threw out my yin and yang energy, spinning it into a frantic vortex to intercept the projectile. The two forces collided with a roar, but the stone spear didn't stop. It pierced right through my energy, shattering my defense instantly. My pupils shrunk. This man really was the ceiling of power for the seven. I gritted my teeth and caught the spear with my bare hands, channeling yin energy into one palm and yang into the other. The momentum was insane. The spear slammed me backward, dragging me through the sky until I crashed through 2 entire mountains. I ended up buried in the earth, my feet sinking deep into the soil as I struggled to hold back the golden weapon. How is he this strong? I hissed, my muscles screaming. With a final burst of strength, I shattered the stone spear into dust. I didn't wait. I teleported directly behind Morix and threw a heavy punch. He didn't have time to raise a shield, so he blocked with his forearms. The sound of the impact was deafening, but Morix didn't stumble. He didn't even flinch. He looked as if he hadn't been hit at all. By now, the Adepti and the migrating people of the Gili Assembly had arrived below us. Ganyu was there, carrying people on her back, and everyone was staring up at the sky in awe. They whispered about the stranger who was actually holding his own against the Lord of Rock. The Lord seems to be fighting a god, the Cloud Retainer said, her voice sharp and serious. We must assist him. She started to fly up, but Ganyu called out to stop her. Ganyu realized this wasn't a death match. It was a test of skill. Even Xiao was there, leaning against a tree and watching intently. He looked so young then, his soul not yet burdened by the heavy karma that would haunt him for centuries. Up in the air, I wasn't paying attention to the crowd. I was focused entirely on the man in front of me. I gritted my teeth and split my body into 2 incarnations, one representing yin and the other yang. They flew to either side of Morix, launching simultaneous blasts of energy. At this distance, I thought, even he wouldn't be able to block it. An interesting technique, a voice whispered right behind my ear. My heart nearly stopped. Before I could react, Morix was behind me. I spun around, transforming my energy into a blade to strike, but he met me with another stone spear. The collision sent ripples of energy through the air like stones thrown into a pond. The raw, overbearing power he possessed was too much. I realized I was about to be sent flying into another mountain range. But just as the blow was about to land, Morix pulled back. Let us stop here, he said calmly. Do you have a better sense of your power now? I wanted to tell him that I nearly died, but I kept my cool. I lowered my hands and bowed. I think I understand now. Thank you, friend. Without this, I would have been lost. Morix smiled. You would have adapted eventually, with or without me. I looked down at the Gili assembly. The sight was heartbreaking. Homes were destroyed, fields were flooded, and the people were struggling through a violent storm. Even with the Adepti helping, the journey to Liyue Harbor was going to be brutal. I'll use my 2 incarnations to help the people, I offered, feeling a surge of pity for them. That would be greatly appreciated, Morix replied. Once this is settled, please, come to Ji and Karst. I would like to host you. I wouldn't miss it, I promised. Morix vanished in a flash of gold, and I sent my 2 avatars down to the assembly. Cloud Retainer tried to intercept them, but Marcosius, the stove god, stopped her with a heavy hand. He had overheard our conversation and knew I was a friend. My young avatar began to glow with a brilliant white light, healing the sick and exhausted. People who had collapsed from fatigue suddenly felt their strength return. Meanwhile, my Yin avatar flew into the sky and blasted the storm clouds apart. The rain stopped. The wind died down. For the first time in days, golden sunlight broke through and bathed the faces of the refugees. An immortal has saved us, the people cried out, falling to their knees in gratitude. I dispelled my avatars and landed near Ganyu. She had shifted into her human form, her eyes wide with relief. Thank you so much, she said, her voice soft. It was nothing, I replied. Looking at her up close, I realized just how beautiful she was. But as she looked at me, her face turned bright red. She stared at me as if she were seeing a ghost. Are you okay? I asked, feeling awkward. Do you have a fever? I reached out to touch her forehead to check her temperature. Ganyu squeaked and scrambled backward, tripping over her own feet until she hit a tree. Please don't touch my head, she stammered, her face flushing even deeper. How frivolous. Cloud Retainer huffed nearby, glaring at me. I ignored her and looked at the crowd. A storyteller among the refugees was already busy scribbling notes. Look at this immortal, the storyteller shouted to the crowd. He has no vision, only the power of Yin and Yang. We shall call him the immortal lord of Yin and Yang. I heard him clearly. My ears were sharp, after all. The immortal lord of Yin and Yang, I thought to myself. I like the sound of that. The other immortals seemed to like the title. Cloud Retainer murmured to herself that it looked like their ranks were about to gain a powerful new member. A large figure approached me. It was Marcosius. He reached out and gave my shoulder a firm, friendly pat. He told me his name and introduced himself as the god of the stove. I looked at him and felt a deep sense of respect. Back in my old world, I knew him as Guoba, but here, he was a mighty god who would eventually sacrifice his power to the earth to wipe out plague and disaster. Hello, I said, smiling back. I am Morpheus, the god of Yin and Yang. It's a pleasure to meet you. Cloud Retainer flapped her wings, signaling the other Adepti. She suggested we escort the refugees to Liyue Harbor before returning to Ji and Karst. 2 days later, we arrived at the harbor. I stared at the city in awe. It was massive, far larger than anything I had seen in the game. This was Liyue 1,000 years before my time, and it was breathtaking. Immortal Lord of Yin and Yang, will you come with us to Ji and Karst? Cloud Retainer asked. All the Adepti turned to look at me, waiting for an answer. Xiao spoke up first. He told us he was heading back to guard Dihua Marsh and vanished in an instant. Marcosius noticed the refugees were eating meager, simple meals. He decided to create clones of himself to teach the people how to cook better food before he disappeared too. Ganyu followed them into the harbor, saying the people needed guidance after the disaster. The other Adepti took to the skies, heading for the mountains. I knew I couldn't stay in the harbor. The people already recognized me, and living among them would be a constant headache. I preferred the quiet, stunning scenery of the mountains. Lead the way, Cloud Retainer, I said, cupping my hands in a respectful gesture. She nodded and took flight, and I followed close behind. We flew for a full day. My jaw nearly dropped as I looked down at the sprawling mountain ranges, rivers, and ancient ruins. The scale of this world was incredible. I realized then that the game I played back home hadn't shown me even a fraction of the real Liyue. When we reached Ji and Karst, Morix was already there waiting. The Adepti bowed deeply, but he waved them off. He turned to me and nodded. He introduced me to the group as Morpheus, a newly born god of Yin and Yang. He told them we had already sparred and that my power was immense. The Adepti were stunned. Morix had defeated countless gods during the Archon War, yet he was giving me such high praise. He paused, looking at me with a thoughtful expression. Friend, Morix said, since you were born in Liyue and have nowhere else to go, why not stay here and live among the Adepti? Cloud Retainer stepped forward to explain that the people already saw me as an immortal and had given me a title. One of the other Adepti, Jiang, looked at me with a strange expression. She remarked that I was quite handsome and seemed to have the strength to back up such a grand name. Is that so? Morix asked, his expression serious. If the people already claim you, would you be willing to officially join the ranks of the Liyue Adepti? Even though you are a god of the same rank as I am, the title of Immortal Lord suits you well. I looked at him and realized his game. He wanted to recruit me now so I could help him manage things when he eventually retired. I glanced over at Ganyu and thought about all the characters I liked from this world. Besides, I loved Liyue. You've got a good eye for talent, I said with a laugh. I accept. Morix smiled and immediately began discussing the governance of Liyue with the others. Following Cloud Retainer's advice, I carved out my own cave dwelling and set up a powerful protective barrier around it. 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. I spent my time decorating my home until it looked like a literal paradise. When the other Adepti visited, they were so impressed they went home to renovate their own places. I also took the time to learn their mystic arts. They were more than happy to teach me. As the years blurred together, I became close friends with all the Adepti. Whenever Morix visited, I would brew a pot of fine tea and we would discuss the future of Liyue. He was constantly surprised by my ideas. In return, I asked him for advice on how to better control my power. We became true friends who kept no secrets from each other. Decades passed. Every year during the Rite of Dissension, Morix and I would appear together to guide the people. They grew to love me, always calling me their immortal lord. One afternoon, while I was having tea with Morix and Ji and Karst, he suddenly froze. He set his teacup down, his expression turning pained and complex. This feeling, is it him? Morix whispered. The day has finally come. Azdaha. What's wrong? I asked, though a part of me already knew. Morpheus, come with me, he said. He didn't explain further. We took off, flying at incredible speeds until we reached a massive, gaping hole in the earth. This is the chasm, Morix explained. Liyue's most important mining site. I stared down at the vast industrial landscape. It was staggering. Huge wooden cranes, sprawling worker housing, and a dark, bottomless pit in the center. I knew what was coming. In the original story, the humans had damaged the ley lines, causing Azdaha to lose his mind. Morix had been forced to fight his oldest friend alone and seal him away. Friend, Morix said, his voice heavy with sorrow. I must battle an old comrade. His strength is not inferior to yours or mine. Please, protect the people of the chasm during our fight. He looked deep into the abyss. This is between us, Morpheus. Do not interfere. Azdaha, have you really succumbed to erosion after all these years? I've got it covered, I promised. I felt for him. I knew that after this fight, the burden of erosion on Morix himself would only grow heavier. Suddenly, the world began to shake. A dragon the size of a mountain crawled out from the depths. Its forelegs were like pillars holding up the sky. This was Azdaha, a being as old as the mountains themselves, now driven mad by time. Panicked screams erupted from below. An earthquake. Run. Help me. The people were terrified. I watched as the massive dragon let out a roar that shook the very foundation of the world. The battle was about to begin. Azdaha's roar was deafening. It ripped through the chasm like a physical wave of force. I winced, my ears ringing. If I didn't act now, the shockwaves alone would liquefy the organs of every human nearby. I didn't waste a second. I summoned my avatars, the two figures blurring into existence beside me. We began teleporting, grabbing the panicked citizens of Liyue one by one and whisking them to safety. It was a race against time. Within minutes, the chasm was empty of civilians. I leaned against a rock, gasping for breath. Moving tens of thousands of people in such a short window was exhausting. My lungs burned. Oh my God, did you see that? A young girl cried out nearby, her eyes sparkling as she looked at one of my avatars. The immortal just carried me. He's so handsome. I ignored the praise, my focus shifting back to the crater. Morix stood firm, his expression grim as he faced the mountain-sized dragon. "Thank you, my friend," Morix said. "From here on, this is between him and me." He turned his gaze toward Azdaha. "Azdaha, you have broken the contract. According to the laws we signed, you shall be sealed in the darkness once more." Morix's voice boomed, amplified by divine power, echoing through the depths of the earth. "Morix," Azdaha roared back, his voice thick with rage. "It was the humans who destroyed the ley lines. They destroyed my home." "Azdaha," Morix said, his voice softening with a trace of grief. "If you still remember our contract, if you remember that I gave you your eyes, then stop this now." "They are nothing but ants," the dragon bellowed. "I am a being of elemental creation. I am as eternal as the mountains and the seas." Morix's face hardened. The time for talk was over. "They are not ants. They are my people. If this is your choice, then the breaker of contracts shall suffer the weight of the rock." A massive stone spear began to manifest in Morix's hand. I watched from the sidelines, my heart racing. This was it, the battle of the legends. But as I looked closer, I noticed something wrong. A faint, oily black mist was swirling around Azdaha's massive frame. My stomach dropped. That wasn't just erosion. That was corruption. As the god of yin and yang, I could see things others couldn't. This was the dark energy from beneath the earth. If he was corrupted, could my yang power purify him? "System," I whispered in my mind. "Scan Azdaha's status." A prompt appeared. To view his full status, I'd have to sacrifice 10 years of my origin energy. It would take a decade to recover. I didn't hesitate. Do it. There's over 1,000 years before the main story starts. I've got time. The data flooded my mind. Status: corrupted by the black calamity of the chasm. It was true. He was infected. System: if I purify him, what's the cost? The answer came back cold. The host will fall into a slumber for approximately 1,000 years. 1,000 years. If I went under now, I'd wake up right around the time the traveler arrives in Mondstadt. While I was lost in thought, the world exploded. Azdaha leaped into the sky, colliding with Morix. The impact created a flash so bright the entire world turned white. They tore through the air, moving from the chasm toward Reincarnated at speeds I could barely track. The other adepti stood by, helpless. "I have to go," I muttered. I took flight, chasing the trail of destruction. Below me, the landscape was being rewritten. Mountains were crumbling. Forests were being flattened. I pushed myself faster, finally catching up to the two titans. Every clash felt like an earthquake. Yin-yang immortal. I looked down. It was Ganyu. She looked terrified. "Please, you have to help Rex Lapis." "This is a matter of contracts," I said, feeling a pang of guilt. I shouldn't interfere. "Then what do we do?" Cloud Retainer asked, landing beside her. "You're the only one here strong enough to stand between them." I looked at the dragon, then at Morix. I sighed. "I have a way, but I might be taking a very long nap." The adepti looked at me, confused. I didn't have time to explain the details of the corruption. Morix hadn't sensed it yet, but I knew that if I didn't act, Azdaha would be lost forever. "I'm doing it," I whispered to myself. "Screw it. What's 1,000 years?" I turned to Cloud Retainer. "After I fall asleep, take my body to my mountain dwelling. And make sure I'm posed heroically. Don't let me look like a slob." She blinked, stunned. "Oh, and the seal on my door? The password is 1-1-4-5-1-4. I yelled over my shoulder as I bolted toward the fight. I vanished, reappearing directly between the god and the dragon. Morix pulled back his strike just in time, his eyes widening. But Azdaha didn't stop. A massive claw swung toward me. I threw a punch with everything I had. The impact sent me flying back hundreds of meters, my bones aching. But Azdaha, despite his mountain-like size, was knocked backward, crashing through a peak. "That hurt," I wheezed, shaking out my hand. I teleported next to Morix. "Friend, why?" he asked, his voice full of confusion. "Morix, it's not just erosion," I said quickly. "He's been corrupted by the calamity beneath the chasm. I can see it. Hold him down for a few seconds. I'm going to purify him." Morix's expression turned grave. "Corruption? Something could corrupt Azdaha in his prime? Friend, if you do this, what is the price?" I flashed him a grin. Don't worry about me. Just give me an opening. And Morix? Thank you. Morix didn't say another word. He understood. He channeled a massive amount of elemental energy, the sky darkening as a gargantuan meteor began to form above. Order guide you. The meteor slammed into Azdaha, the light blinding everyone for miles. When the dust settled, the dragon was encased in stone, momentarily paralyzed. Now, Morix shouted. I moved. I appeared right in front of Azdaha and slammed my hands against his scales. I began pouring my yang energy into him. It wasn't enough. Not even close. Fine. I growled, gritting my teeth. Take it all. I began burning my very essence, my origin energy flooding into the dragon. A brilliant white light erupted from my palms, washing over the entire crater. Where the land had been scarred and dead, grass and flowers began to explode from the dirt. In seconds, a lush forest grew where the meteor had struck. Friend, what are you doing? Morix's voice sounded far away. I could feel my consciousness slipping. My body felt light, like it was dissolving into the wind. I saw the black mist around Azdaha begin to evaporate, replaced by a calm, golden glow. I did it, but the darkness was closing in on me. Oh no! I heard Cloud Retainer cry out from the distance. Everything went black. Morix looked at me with a complicated expression. He knew what I was doing. I was burning my very origin to save Azdaha. Doing this meant I would fall into a slumber for 1,000 years, and my very soul might lose its edge. Even Guoba looked on, making small, worried sounds. But they didn't know I had a system. Morix, I whispered, my voice fading. I might sleep for a long time, but having a friend like you makes it worth it. When I wake up, let's have that tea. My eyelids felt like lead. My body tilted forward, ready to collapse. Before I hit the ground, Morix caught me. His face was a blur of guilt, shock, and grief. Fine, Morix said softly. When that day comes, I will personally brew the finest tea for you. The other adepti watched in silence. Ganyu covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe I was sacrificing myself like this. Hand the immortal to me, Cloud Retainer said, stepping forward. She had taken her human form, long, silver-white hair flowing down her back, wearing a white Taoist robe. Even in this somber moment, her elegance was undeniable. He told me before he slept that he wished to be sealed within his own cave dwelling. Morix nodded solemnly and handed my limp body over to her. Cloud Retainer held me gently, her eyes filled with a worry she couldn't hide. She took flight, carrying me toward Jian Karst. Morix watched us until we disappeared over the horizon. If I had been awake, I probably would have shouted in surprise. Cloud Retainer was beautiful. Sorry, Ganyu, I might have a new favorite. Meanwhile, the stone scales on Azdaha's body began to crack. His massive form shrunk down until he stood as a middle-aged man with dragon horns. He looked around, dazed. Morix? Where am I? What happened? Azdaha asked. Morix sighed and explained everything. Azdaha's expression shifted from confusion to deep regret. He had been corrupted by the Black Calamity without even realizing it. He looked toward the chasm, sensing something lingering there. Morix promised to investigate and told Azdaha to rest. The seasons changed. Spring turned to winter. 500 years passed in the blink of an eye. A disaster sparked by Kinria swept across Teyvat. The black tide of monsters attacked the 7 nations. These weren't just beasts. They were the followers of fallen gods from the Archon War, seeking revenge on Morix. The Millelith fought with everything they had. The Yikshas stood their ground, refusing to let a single monster pass the borders. Azdaha, now back to his mountain-sized form, guarded Guyun Stone Forest. He crushed entire armies of monsters with a single step. His roar shook the earth. He froze the very seas to halt their advance. Shao, the conqueror of demons, fought a desperate battle in Dihua Marsh. The sky was permanently dark. Houses were reduced to rubble. This was a war of gods and demons, and it lasted for half a month. Many Yikshas succumbed to the karmic debt and fell into madness. One named Bosatius led a massive horde into the chasm, sealing himself inside to save the rest. Because I had saved Azdaha 500 years ago, Liyue wasn't completely destroyed. He protected the people and their homes. But near the end of the war, A small girl gathering herbs on a mountain slipped. She fell down a cliff and stumbled into a hidden cave, my cave. Her leg was broken. She crawled inside to bandage herself, but the sounds of the war outside grew louder. The shockwaves of divine energy were too much for a mortal child. Bleeding and broken, she saw a handsome young man lying on a stone platform, looking like he was merely sleeping. She wanted to call for help, but her voice failed her. A massive boulder fell, sealing the entrance. She was trapped. As her life faded, she made one final wish. She wanted time to stop. She wanted to go back to when she was happy and alive. Tears fell from her eyes. Her desire to live, her fear of death, and her longing for her family reached a breaking point. A glowing vision appeared beside her. The power of cryo responded to her desperate wish to freeze time. But a vision couldn't pull her back from the brink of death. Suddenly, a mechanical voice echoed in my mind. Ding! System has detected a powerful wish nearby. Awakening host temporarily. My head throbbed. I felt completely drained of energy. I sat up, rubbing my temples, looking at the mess in my cave. System? What's going on? Did an earthquake hit? Host, it has been 500 years. A disaster from Kenria is sweeping Liyue. Addictive and demons are at war outside. I see, I muttered. I could only stay awake for an hour. Then I noticed someone else in the cave. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Wait, is that Chi-Chi? I flashed to her side instantly. At that exact moment, the battle outside came to a screeching halt. Cloud Retainer, Mountain Shaper, Ganyu, and the demons all stopped mid-swing. They felt a massive surge of power coming from my cave. Is that the power of a vision? Ganyu gasped. Wait, that's the Immortal's dwelling. I looked down at Chi-Chi. She was still breathing, but only just. My own origin energy was severely damaged, and I didn't have the strength to heal her on my own. I felt a pang of guilt looking at her small, broken form. Suddenly, I sensed something outside. The air shifted. I recognized those auras immediately. It was Cloud Retainer, Mountain Shaper, and the others. A plan formed in my mind. I didn't wait. I gathered what strength I had and caused the cave entrance to explode outward. I stepped through the dust and debris. I was wearing my dark white robes, looking every bit the powerful immortal they remembered. It's the immortal. Ganyu was the first to cry out. Her voice was thick with joy and shock. Cloud Retainer and the others landed nearby, their eyes wide. Lord Immortal, you've awakened? Are your wounds healed? Mountain Shaper asked, his voice trembling with excitement. I could see what they were thinking. If I was back at full power, Liyue's crisis was over. Between me and Morix, no demon or monster stood a chance. Even Azdaha was back. To them, the war was already won. I looked at the massive demons looming in the sky and then at the gathered Adepti. I kept my voice calm and steady. Stop your battle for a moment. What does your war have to do with the little girl inside my cave? The demons froze. They stared at me, terror flickering in their eyes. They were followers of fallen gods, and they knew exactly what kind of power I wielded. They knew a true god when they saw one. All of you, come down here, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a command they couldn't ignore. Come with me and look at this child. I turned my gaze toward the Adepti. Cloud Retainer, Mountain Shaper, Ganyu, you come too. We entered the cave. The sight of Chi-Chi, pale and dying, softened even the hearts of the demons. These monsters weren't born evil. They had once been protectors of their own people before their gods fell. Seeing a child caught in the crossfire of their grudge hit them hard, especially when they saw the cryo vision sparking beside her. Let's call a truce, Cloud Retainer said softly. She looked at Chi-Chi, then at the demons. She was caught in the shockwaves of our fighting. She only has one breath left. The demons looked ashamed. Their quest for revenge against Morix had cost an innocent life. Without a word, both the Adepti and the demons stepped forward. They released their collective energy, pouring pure divine power into Chi-Chi's body to drag her back from the brink of death. It worked, but there was a problem. Chi-Chi was just a human child. She couldn't handle that much raw power combined with a new vision. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with a frantic light. She lost control, her body lashing out with bursts of ice and energy. I frowned. I raised my hand, channeling my yang energy into her. The golden light suppressed the chaotic power instantly. Chi-Chi's eyes closed, and she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. What now, Lord Immortal? Mountain Shaper asked. She can't contain this power. It will take hundreds of years for her body to adapt. I didn't answer with words. I waved my hand, making Chi-Chi's body float in the air. I led them out of the cave to the cliffside. Seal her in amber, I commanded. I flipped my hand, injecting a balance of yin and yang energy into her to stabilize her soul, then encased her in a protective amber seal. I added one final ward over the top. I walked to the edge of the cliff and looked out over Liyue. The others followed, watching me silently. This war between you ends now, I said, my back turned to them. But Lord Immortal, Mountain Shaper started to protest. My lip twitched. If only they knew. I didn't even have 1% of my power left. I was running on fumes, pretending to be at my peak. I turned around to face the demons. You aren't truly demons, I said, looking at the dark mist clinging to them. You've just had your minds clouded by the filth of the Dark Sea. During the Archon War, many gods fell. But Morix never harmed your people. He took them in. He made them part of Liyue. The humans you are killing now are the descendants of the very people you once swore to protect. The demons went silent. I reached out, sending waves of yang energy into their bodies. The black mist began to dissolve, evaporating into nothingness. Were we wrong? One of them whispered. As the corruption faded, their monstrous forms shifted. They turned back into what they truly were, powerful, illuminated beasts. One looked like a horse with a single horn. Others were elegant, winged creatures. They shifted into human forms and bowed deeply to me. Thank you, Lord Immortal, for clearing our minds, they said in unison. I nodded. They weren't adepti, but they were powerful spirits. Go. Find a place to live in seclusion within Liyue or the city. Do not return to the Dark Sea. You are too weak for that place. It will only break your minds again. The spirits looked at me, moved by my words. We are ashamed of what we've done, their leader said. We will go to Liyue Harbor first to help the people rebuild. After that, we will vanish into the mountains and trouble the world no more. They bowed one last time and took flight, heading toward the coast. I turned back to my friends. Cloud Retainer, Mountain Shaper, and Ganyu looked exhausted and battered. I could feel my own time running out. I had to finish this. You all look like a mess, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Don't tease us, Lord, Ganyu said, her eyes watery. Are you really okay? Why did you wake up so suddenly? I didn't explain. I simply raised my hands and sent the last of my gathered yang energy into them. Their wounds closed instantly. Their fatigue vanished. I was forced awake, I said, my voice growing faint. I don't have much time left. I'm going back to sleep now. Go to the harbor. Help the people. I walked back into my cave without looking back. I cleaned the space with a final wave of my hand and resealed the entrance. Outside, I knew Ganyu and the others were standing there with heavy hearts, but they eventually left to follow my orders. I lay back down on the cold stone platform. My eyes felt like lead. System, I whispered in my mind. Let me sleep. Ding. Host is entering hibernation. When you next awaken, the voice faded. The world went dark, and I drifted back into the long, silent dream. The system informed me that my physical stats would increase tenfold upon awakening. Once that happened, I wouldn't need the system anymore. It would unbind itself automatically. 10 times stronger? That was insane. I realized I would be able to walk through Teyvat without fearing anyone or anything. With that final, pleasant thought, I drifted back into a deep, silent sleep. 7 days after I closed my eyes, Morix returned to Liyue from the ruins of Kenria. He stood at the edge of the city, completely stunned. He saw giant spirits in the shapes of butterflies and horses using their divine power to help the citizens rebuild their homes. He was confused. He didn't remember Liyue having so many adepti. Luyan appeared before him and bowed. She explained that these were the great demons from the Archon War, the followers of fallen gods who had fled to the Dark Sea long ago. I had redeemed them before I fell asleep. Now, they were working voluntarily to repay their debt to Liyue. Morix stayed silent for a long time. He flew to the highest peak and looked down at the city slowly coming back to life. He felt a deep loneliness. He wondered when he would see his old friend again. Time flowed like a river. 500 years passed in the blink of an eye. Over those centuries, my legend grew. In the hearts of the Liyue people, my status was now almost equal to Rex Lapis himself. A chime echoed in my mind. My strength had fully recovered. No, it had surged. The system announced the tenfold increase and officially unbound itself. I opened my eyes and sat up. 500 years had gone by. I felt the raw, overwhelming power coursing through my veins. I stood up and stretched, feeling like I could split the sky with a thought. I waved my hand and dissolved the seals on my cave. As I stepped outside, the bright sunlight hit my face. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I decided to change my appearance. I used my power to shift my features and clothes. I tied my hair back with a simple bamboo pin and grabbed a black and white folding fan decorated with landscapes. I wore a snow-white robe with a wide, cloud-patterned belt and a single piece of dark jade hanging from my waist. I looked like a refined, handsome young scholar. I suppressed my aura so no one would recognize me. I wanted to see the new Liyue for myself. With a single thought, I teleported to a quiet corner of Liyue Harbor. I walked onto the main street and felt a wave of nostalgia. The air was filled with the smell of street food. Vendors were shouting about grilled tiger fish and discounts at Shinue kiosk. It looked exactly like the city I remembered, just grander and more crowded. I wondered if the main story had started yet. Across the city at Wangxing Funeral Parlor, a man sitting at a tea table suddenly froze. He put his cup down, his eyes widening. He stood up immediately. "Director, please excuse me," Zhongli said. Hu Tao was lounging on a chair, looking bored. "Hey, Zhongli, don't you dare go to those expensive restaurants and send the bill to us again. We haven't had a client in weeks." Zhongli didn't look back. "I'm not going to eat, Director. I'm going to meet an old friend." Hu Tao groaned and covered her stomach. "Fine, whatever. Just bring me back some food from Wanmin restaurant. I'm starving." I was wandering the streets, trying to navigate the massive harbor, when I saw a familiar figure walking toward me. He wore a brown suit with dragon patterns and moved with a calm, steady grace. "Old friend, it's been a long time," Zhongli said as he reached me. I recognized his soul instantly. "Morix," I whispered. He smiled softly. "My name is Zhongli now. Let's walk and talk." We strolled through the bustling streets. I told him my new name was Bai. He looked at me, his eyes filled with curiosity. He told me he could sense that my power had reached a level equal to his own. I just told him I hadn't been idle during my long sleep. Zhongli grew serious as we walked. He told me he planned to step down as the Geo Archon during the Rite of Dissension in 2 days. He wanted to test if Liyue was ready to enter a new era without a god. He spoke about the erosion of time and how even the strongest stone eventually wears away. He had overheard a merchant telling a worker that their duty was finished and they should rest. It had made him wonder if his own duty was finally over. Meanwhile, back at my cave in Jiyun Karst, Lu Yun arrived to check on me. She stared at the broken seals and the empty stone platform. She panicked. "The immortal? Where is he?" she shrieked. "Did someone steal him while he was sleeping?" She sent a frantic message to the other adepti, Li Shui and Xianyu. They arrived in seconds, furious that someone would dare kidnap me. Shinhe, Lu Yun's disciple, walked up and asked what was wrong. "Shinhe, go to the harbor immediately," Lu Yun ordered. "Find the Liyue Qixing. Tell them the immortal has vanished and they must find him at all costs." Shinhe nodded and started her journey down the mountain. Back in the harbor, Hu Tao had finally given up on waiting for Zhongli and was heading to Wanmin restaurant herself. I looked at Zhongli as he mentioned one last thing. A traveler from another world was currently making their way from Mondstadt to Liyue. The gears of fate were finally turning. Zhongli didn't hold anything back as we walked. He told me his entire plan. I was the only old friend he had left to talk to, the only one he truly trusted. I looked at him and told him I would support whatever choice he made. It was time for Liyue to grow up. I wanted to see how the people and the Liyue Qixing would handle a world without their gods. After all, I had spent decades ruling this land alongside him. The people used to call me the Immortal Lord. I had grown attached to this place. Zhongli looked at me, a bit worried. He admitted that my sudden awakening might complicate his plans. To the people of Liyue, I was just as famous as Rex Lapis himself. He needed to find a way to hide my identity. I just laughed and told him to relax. No one had seen me leave my cave. I had already changed my clothes, and after 1,000 years, I doubted anyone still remembered my face. We made our way to Wanmin restaurant. As soon as we arrived, a girl with plum blossom eyes started complaining. It was Hu Tao. She grumbled at Zhongli for taking so long to bring her food. Then, she spotted me. She stared, noting that I was just as handsome as Zhongli, if not more. She asked if I had eaten yet, and invited me to sit. Xiangling was the chef today, and the food smelled incredible. I couldn't turn her down. It had been 1,000 years since I'd tasted a real meal. Zhongli introduced me as his old friend, Qiu Bai. He explained that he was now a consultant for the Wangxing funeral parlor, and that Hu Tao was his boss. I looked at her, realizing she was even more spirited and beautiful than I remembered from my past life's memories. Zhongli suggested that I stay at the funeral parlor as well. He told Hu Tao that my knowledge was even deeper than his own. Hu Tao rested her chin on her hand, watching me. She noticed I had the same calm, elegant mannerisms as Zhongli. She didn't mind having two handsome consultants to look at every day. She officially hired me on the spot. I told her I could help with the business, as I understood the laws of yin and yang. Hu Tao nearly jumped out of her seat. She leaned in so close our faces almost touched. She asked if I meant that literally. I nodded. I was the immortal lord of yin and yang, after all. I had spent so much time with Morix that I was starting to talk like an old man too, but my power was no joke. Zhongli smiled, confirming that my understanding of life and death was absolute. Hu Tao was thrilled. She told me I was exactly the helper she needed. She patted my shoulder and told me to get ready. We were going to Wuwang Hill that night. She headed off to take a nap, leaving Zhongli and me at the table. I took a sip of tea, watching her go. She was an energetic girl. Zhongli sighed, admitting he had a hard time keeping up with her. Just then, a young girl walked out of the kitchen with a steaming plate of food. A small, round creature followed at her heels. It was Xiangling and her companion, Guoba. She set the food down and looked at me curiously, wondering who this new friend was. But Guoba stopped in his tracks. He stared at me and Zhongli, his eyes wide with recognition. We looked back at him. Long time no see, Marcosius. By the time evening rolled around, Hu Tao was ready. She left Zhongli to watch the parlor and dragged me toward Wuwang Hill. As we walked, I realized we were moving far too slowly. I tapped her on the shoulder and told her I knew a small trick to speed things up. She looked at me, confused, asking if I could fly. I told her to hold on tight. Before she could protest, the world spun. In a heartbeat, we were standing at the misty border of the afterlife. Hu Tao's eyes went wide. She screamed, asking how I could call that a small trick. We were miles away from the harbor in an instant. She began to suspect I was an adeptus, grumbling that I should have used that power sooner so she wouldn't have to walk so far. I just teased her, asking if she enjoyed the exercise. She huffed and pulled out her staff, leading the way into the woods. Wuwang Hill was a place where the sun never shone. The air was thick with gray mist and the lingering energy of the dead. We stepped into the shadows, ready to face whatever was waiting in the dark. Eerie ghost fires flickered all around us. Hu Tao had been able to see things others couldn't since she was a child. As the 75th director of the Wangxing funeral parlor, it was her job to guard this boundary between life and death. I scanned the area, my senses sharper than any mortal's. From a distance, I caught the sound of voices. My ears, attuned to the whispers of the world, picked up a group of treasure hoarders nearby. They sounded desperate. One of them groaned about being trapped, unable to find an exit no matter how many markers they left. They were skin and bones, stuck in these woods for 3 days and nights. They spoke in hushed, terrified tones about a ghost girl who kept appearing and vanishing. She had lured them in with promises of treasure, only to lead them in circles. One man collapsed, paralyzed by fear, swearing he just wanted to go home. I watched them from the shadows and felt a bit amused. I leaned over and told Hu Tao what I was seeing. She started to think. Maintaining the border was serious work for her parlor. She figured the little girl must be a soul with unfinished business, someone unwilling to move on to the ordinary place. Hu Tao complimented my eyesight, noting how far away those men were, but decided we had to help them first. We walked toward the shivering group. I knew exactly where we were. I had visited Wuwang Hill 1,000 years ago, long before I ever met Hu Tao in her story quests. As we approached, Hu Tao gripped her staff of Homa, ready to chase the bandits out by force. I reached out and caught her arm. She looked at me, confused. She asked why I was stopping her. I told her there was no need for such a hassle. With a simple wave of my hand, the entire group of treasure hoarders vanished into thin air. Hu Tao stood there, her jaw dropping so low she could have swallowed an egg. She was horrified, asking if I had just killed them. I laughed and explained I had simply sent them outside the mist. Outside the hill, the bandits stood in a daze, wondering how they had escaped. They didn't stick around to find out. They ran for their camp, thinking only of food. Back in the woods, Hu Tao was still reeling from my small trick. She looked at me like I was the most mysterious person she'd ever met, right up there with Zhongli. We kept moving, searching for the little girl the bandits had mentioned. Hu Tao tracked her footprints carefully while I followed behind. I looked at her back, thinking about how strong she was. She acted quirky and energetic, but I knew there were deep stories hidden behind that smile. Finally, we saw her. A small, glowing, transparent girl sat on a rock. She looked up and asked if we were there to play. Hu Tao sighed, telling her it was time to go where she belonged. But the girl, whose name was Xiao Ming, shook her head. She said her grandma told her to wait right there. She had been waiting for a very, very long time. Hu Tao moved to grab her, but I called her over to a nearby tree. I told her to let me handle it. At this point, Hu Tao was ready to believe anything I said. She joked, asking if I was going to magically make her grandma appear. I paused, surprised that she had guessed my plan. Her eyes went wide. She couldn't believe I could actually do it. I felt a bit self-conscious with her staring so intently at me. I focused, and the energies of yin and yang began to swirl in my palms. I sent a flash of white light into the little girl, then pulled a thread of her memory back out. Using my power, I manifested the image of a kind, elderly woman from the girl's own soul. The old woman waved. Xiaoming cried out and ran into her arms. The grandmother smiled, telling the girl it was time to go. She looked at me and bowed deeply, thanking me for the reunion. They waved goodbye to us as their forms dissolved into points of light, finally finding peace. Hu Tao just stood there, blinking. She hadn't even looked away, yet she still couldn't wrap her head around how I had done it. Hu Tao stared at me, her eyes wide. She couldn't understand how I had just summoned the girl's grandmother out of thin air. To her, it looked like a miracle. To me, it was just a simple application of my power. She realized that a job that usually took her all night had been finished in minutes. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was definitely going to ask for my help more often. I told her not to be so surprised. I explained that I simply knew a bit about the path of yin and yang. I was happy to help her out. I caught her stunned expression and couldn't help but laugh. Hu Tao eventually shook it off and grinned, slapping me on the shoulder. She declared that from now on, I was officially her friend. Then, she gave me a look that said she wanted another shortcut back to Liyue Harbor. I knew exactly what she was thinking. I told her to hold on tight. She grabbed my sleeve, and once again, the world spun around us. When she opened her eyes, we were standing right back inside Wangxing Funeral Parlor. It was still dark outside. Hu Tao looked dazed. Usually, her trips to Wuwang Hill lasted until morning. This was way too fast. She muttered to herself that I was a much better helper than Zhongli. Zhongli was sitting in a nearby chair and heard every word. He cleared his throat, looking a bit awkward. I quickly looked away to avoid his gaze. He turned to Hu Tao and told her it was late. He reminded her to rest because the rite of dissension was only 2 days away. Hu Tao yawned, agreeing that she was exhausted. She thanked me one last time and headed to her room, leaving Zhongli and me alone. Zhongli immediately placed a soundproof barrier around us. His expression became serious. He told me he had made a contract with the Tsaritsa. In 2 days, the Fatui harbingers, Child and Signora, would arrive in Liyue to take his gnosis. He took a sip of tea and looked at me. I asked him what the Cryo-Archon was really after by collecting all the divine authorities. He didn't have an answer. I poured myself some tea. Even as someone who had traveled to this world, there were still many mysteries I didn't understand. I looked at Zhongli. He had ruled Liyue for over 3,000 years. He had seen so many friends leave and so many stories end. Even the strongest stone wears down over time. It's called erosion. Zhongli noticed me staring. He touched his face, wondering if he had something on it. I called him by his true name, Morix. I told him I was going to restore the erosion within his body. He looked skeptical at first. He wondered if the erosion placed by the heavenly principles could truly be undone. But seeing my serious face, he decided to trust me. He closed his eyes and relaxed. I channeled the energy of Yang into him. He felt it like a clear breeze from the peaks of Jian Karst. His mind cleared. Memories that had become blurred started to sharpen and overlap. He didn't feel overwhelmed. He felt at peace. After a while, I pulled my hand back. He opened his eyes, looking refreshed. I told him that at this rate, I need to do this about a dozen more times to fully fix the damage. I promised to help him every 3 days. Then, I asked about Azdaha. I had purified the dragon's corruption centuries ago, but I hadn't fixed his erosion. Zhongli's expression darkened. He told me that 300 years ago, the erosion finally took hold of Azdaha. They fought for 3 days and nights until Zhongli had no choice but to seal him underground. Zhongli looked at me with a glimmer of hope. He asked if I could fix Azdaha too. He was lonely. Most of his old friends were gone. If Azdaha could be restored, they could share tea together again. I smiled. Back then, I wasn't strong enough, but now my power was 10 times greater. I told him I was confident I could do it. We agreed to visit the seal after the rite of dissension. Zhongli mentioned the seal had been feeling loose lately. I told him I had plans for the next day. I needed to visit the chasm. I wanted to investigate the source of the dark calamity there. Zhongli warned me that the bottom of the chasm was sealed because even he struggled with the black energy there. He promised to undo the seal for me when I arrived. With that settled, we headed to our rooms. The room Hu Tao gave me was simple but spacious. As I lay there, I realized I hadn't had a real night's sleep in 500 years. My long slumber wasn't the same as resting. It was just a gap in time. The next morning, high up in the Jade Chamber, Ningguang was dealing with a massive headache. As the Tian Quan of the Liu Qixing, she was elegant and composed, but the current situation was stressful. The immortal of Yin and Yang had vanished. She knew from ancient records that this immortal was a close friend of Rex Lapis. They were supposed to appear together at the rite of dissension to guide Liu. The problem was, she didn't even know what he looked like. The books said Rex Lapis usually appeared in his divine form, but the immortal always took a human shape. He wore black and white robes and had long hair, but his face was always hidden by a mysterious mist. Ningguang stood up and spoke to the messenger from the Adepti. She promised that Liu would do everything possible to find the missing immortal. She quickly gave orders to her assistants to begin the search. Ningguang realized she needed more information. She called Ganyu over, but the poor girl was still lost in grief over my disappearance. Her eyes were red, and she looked completely heartbroken. Ningguang comforted her for a moment before getting straight to the point. She asked Ganyu if she remembered what I looked like. Since Ganyu had actually seen me, she was the only lead they had. Ganyu sat down and closed her eyes, trying to recall every detail. She described my clothes as ink white, with a taiji diagram hanging from my waist that looked like a vision. She said my eyes were deep like the midnight sky and my hair fell over my shoulders like flowing ink. Then she paused. Her face turned a bright shade of red. She whispered that I was incredibly handsome and elegant. She even remembered how I used to pat her head when she was a child. Ningguang noted every detail. She looked at Ganyu's blushing face with a strange expression. To the rest of the world, Ganyu was an ancient and powerful adeptus. But in my eyes, was she really just a little girl? Ningguang didn't dwell on it. She quickly summoned her assistants, by Shi and by One, and handed them the description. The search for the missing immortal was officially on. Meanwhile, I stepped out of the Wangxing funeral parlor and onto the streets of Liu Harbor. The city was buzzing. Everywhere I went, people were whispering about my disappearance. They couldn't believe an immortal who had been guarded for centuries could just vanish. The Millilith were patrolling every corner, and the atmosphere was tense. I realized having a legendary reputation wasn't always a good thing. It was time for me to go. I had a goal. I needed to see the chasm and find out what this dark calamity really was. I took the sealing key Zhongli had given me and vanished from the city. A moment later, I was hovering high above the chasm. I hid my presence and drifted downward into the depths. I passed mining tunnels, old buildings, and groups of fatui and treasure hoarders hiding in the shadows. I reached the bottom and landed. I took out the small stone star Zhongli had given me and pressed it against the ground. Ancient runes flared to life, glowing intensely as the seal broke. A bottomless pit opened up before me. I flew down into the darkness, and what I saw at the bottom shocked me. Massive tree roots stretched out in every direction, crawling through the cavern like veins. They were pulsing with a thick, eerie black fog. The ley lines of Liyue were being choked and corrupted by this energy. This was the source of the disaster Morix had warned me about. I used my divine power to track the flow of the fog. It all led to one place. In the center of the cavern stood a giant ancient tree. It was a sickly purple-black color, radiating a terrifying pressure. If I had come here 1,000 years ago without my divine protection, this tree would have corrupted my mind instantly. Even Azdaha, as strong as he was, had fallen victim to this influence because of his erosion. This tree was poisoning the very earth. If I didn't deal with it now, it would destroy Liyue's future. I didn't hesitate. I decided to purify the source. I summoned my Yang incarnation, a version of myself dressed in pure white. I folded my hands together, and a blinding white light erupted from my palms. It was as bright as the sun, filling every corner of the dark underground space. The black fog hissed and burned away as soon as the light touched it. Within moments, the corruption was gone. The ancient tree began to glow with life again. Emerald green leaves sprouted from the branches, and the roots turned a healthy, vibrant color. I tossed a ball of pure white light into the air above the tree to keep the area illuminated. It looked peaceful now, almost like a hidden sanctuary. With the job done, I absorbed my incarnation and left the chasm. Not long after I departed, 2 abyss lectors stepped through a portal. One of them was Inju, a face I would have recognized anywhere. They stared at the purified tree in utter shock. The power of the abyss combined with the dark calamity had been wiped out instantly. Even the gods of this world shouldn't have been able to clear it so easily. Their plans, years in the making, had been ruined. They realized they had to report this to their prince immediately. Deep in the abyss, Ether sat on his throne. He was thinking of his sister, Lumi, and their brief reunion. He knew they would meet again, but not yet. Not until his war with destiny was over. Suddenly, the 2 lectors appeared and knelt before him. They told him the dark calamity in the chasm had been purified by an unknown force. Ether went silent. None of the 7 possessed the power to purify that specific type of corruption. Whoever did this had to be a god on their level, or perhaps something even more ancient. He decided to put the chasm plan on hold. He turned his gaze toward Inazuma and the depths of Enkinomia. He summoned another lector, Inju, and ordered him to go there. Back in Liyue Harbor, I found Zhongli sitting at a tea house, calmly listening to a storyteller. I walked over and sat down beside him. I told him he sure knew how to relax while the rest of the world was in a panic. I poured myself a cup of tea and relaxed. Zhongli looked at me with a mysterious smile. He told me the storyteller was about to start a new tale, and that today's story was actually about me. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly very interested to hear what the people were saying. I leaned back in my chair, ready to see what kind of stories the people of Liyue were telling these days. The storyteller, Tian Taizue, snapped his fan shut and then opened it against his chest with a flourish. He began. He spoke of a time when the Geely assembly was swallowed by floods as high as the pillars of heaven. He described how the Adepti and Rex Lapis himself fought to protect the people, guiding them toward what would become Liyue Harbor. Then, he claimed a terrifying power shot into the sky from the distance. According to him, Rex Lapis searched the valleys until he found a mysterious figure, the immortal of Yin and Yang. The storyteller made it sound like an epic movie. He said Rex Lapis and I fought for 300 rounds, a battle so fierce it cracked the earth and shook the mountains. Eventually, I supposedly fell into a slight disadvantage, and we became best friends. Then, unable to watch the people suffer from the storms and disease, I used my divine power to shatter the dark clouds and calm the winds. Tian Taizue closed his fan, and the crowd erupted, tossing Mora onto the stage. I looked at Zhongli, feeling incredibly awkward. The story was a total exaggeration. Back then, I barely held my own for a few moves. If Zhongli hadn't held back, I would have been finished right then and there. Old friend, there's no need for modesty, Zhongli said, sipping his tea calmly. Your current strength is likely not inferior to mine. I leaned in and lowered my voice. I told him that I had completely purified the black energy beneath the chasm. I didn't know where that corruption came from, but I had turned the place into a scenic wonder. I even installed a miniature sun down there, making it look like a hidden underground world. Zhongli looked genuinely surprised. He had tried to deal with that area himself using various divine powers and couldn't clear it. I had done it in a single trip. But then he smiled, as if realizing that I had always been full of mysteries. Still, he warned me that the area reached deep into the ley lines. He had already placed a new seal on it to keep the common folk away. While we were relaxing, the Adepti were losing their minds. High up in Jian Karst, they were flying in every direction, searching for any trace of me. Cloud Retainer, now in her human form, stared into the distance with a worried frown. Mountain Shaper suggested that maybe I had just woken up and decided to go for a walk. Cloud Retainer snapped at him, asking how someone who had been in a deep sleep for 5 centuries could just wake up and wander off without a word. She refused to give up and headed out to search again. Back at the tea house, I started thinking about the power levels of this world. During the Archon War, it was basically a survival game for gods. In my mind, I categorized them into high, mid, and low-tier gods. Zhongli and I were definitely high-tier now. Before my power-up, I was probably mid-tier, around the same level as Ozhel. Even sealed and pinned to the ocean floor, Ozhel required the combined strength of the Adepti and the Jade Chamber just to be pushed back. Mortal strength really was nothing compared to a god. I felt my power growing slowly but steadily. I wondered if it was because I didn't suffer from erosion like the others. I looked at Zhongli. Compared to the Archon War, are you stronger now or back then? I was stronger during the war, Zhongli replied simply. If it wasn't for the erosion imposed by the heavenly principles, I whispered, setting up a soundproof barrier around us. Would your strength grow or decline? It would grow, he said without hesitation. I nodded. It seemed being immune to erosion was a massive advantage. Suddenly, a young woman approached our table. She wore a purple dress, and a pair of buns on her head looked almost like cat ears. A pair of beautifully patterned stockings covered her legs, and a pair of sharp, intelligent eyes scanned the area. It was Keqing, the Yuheng of the Liua Qixing. Have either of you seen the immortal in this painting? She asked, frowning slightly as she held up a scroll. She recognized Zhongli as a consultant from the Wangxing funeral parlor, but she looked at me with curiosity. Yuheng-sama, Zhongli introduced me smoothly. This is an old friend of mine. He traveled back to Liua specifically for the rite of dissension. Ah, the Yuheng of the Qixing, I said, putting on my best friendly face. I've heard much about you. I reached out my hand for a handshake. Usually, Keqing wouldn't just shake hands with a strange man, but something about the situation made her hesitate and then comply. Her hand was warm and soft. It had been 1,000 years since I'd held a girl's hand, and I found myself lingering a second too long. She blushed, quickly pulling her hand back and looking away. I haven't seen the immortal you're looking for, I said, shaking my head. I doubt Brother Zhongli has either. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. If only she knew the person she was looking for was sitting right in front of her. She thanked us and walked away, looking up at the sky with a determined expression. Where could you be, great immortal? I will find you. I watched her go. Is this the current generation of the Qixing? I asked Zhongli. She is the one among them who respects the gods the least, Zhongli said with a small chuckle. It's because Liua has people like her that I'm considering retirement. I almost choked on my tea. Respects the gods the least? If only he knew. Keqing probably had a secret room full of Rex Lapis figurines. In Liua, you were either a fan of the Geo Archon or a closet fan of the Geo Archon. What are you laughing at? Zhongli asked. I just thought of something happy, I replied. After the storytelling ended, Zhongli headed back to the funeral parlor. I decided to wander the streets of Liua Harbor. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. I heard a couple of girls whispering nearby about how handsome I was. They had heard I was a new consultant at the Wangxing funeral parlor. It seemed like being a consultant was the perfect cover for a god in hiding. A woman passing by stared at me, her face flushing a deep red. She leaned toward her friend and whispered loudly enough for me to hear. Do you think the Wangxing funeral parlor is just a front for keeping handsome men? First Zhongli, now this one. They're all so good-looking. Hu Tao is still so young, though, her friend replied. Well, he's certainly not, the first woman grumbled, her voice tinged with a bit of envy. I nearly laughed out loud. So the director was small, was she? I glanced toward the harbor. She was definitely on the flatter side, but I wasn't about to say that to her face. I needed to find somewhere quiet. Tomorrow was going to be a massive show. Morix was planning to fake his own death. I could already imagine Hu Tao's face when she realized she had to organize a funeral for her own god. I'd probably end up helping her carry the coffin. I slipped out of Liyue Harbor and teleported to a quiet bridge near Jian Karst. I found a stray fishing rod leaning against a stone. This felt like the right pace for an old soul. I cast the line and waited. While I sat in the silence, Ningguang was likely losing sleep up in her jade chamber. I could picture her leaning her chin on her hand, staring at the wall of intelligence reports. Fatui harbingers, a mysterious traveler, and the sudden disappearance of the Yin-Yang immortal, me. She was probably planning to ask Rex Lapis for guidance during the rite of dissension. She didn't fear the Fatui, even though she knew they had already taken the Anemo Archon's gnosis. She believed nothing in this world could actually assassinate her god. Back at the river, the sun began to set. I stared at my bucket. One fish. Just one. Meanwhile, dozens of fat, juicy fish were mocking me, swimming in circles right in front of my face. Fine. I muttered, my patience snapping. You don't want a bite? Then don't. I flicked my wrist, releasing a tiny surge of divine energy into the water. Every fish in the river suddenly floated to the surface, stunned. I looked at the hundreds of silver scales shimmering in the twilight. Then I sighed. This took the fun out of it. Fishing was supposed to be about inner peace. I waved my hand, sending the fish back into the depths. Today's a wash, I said, grabbing the one fish I had actually caught. I started a small campfire and began roasting it. The next morning, the sky was a pale, misty gray. Near the outskirts of Liyue Harbor, a tiny floating creature with a starry cape pointed toward the city. Look, traveler. We made it, Paimon squealed. Lumen looked at the sprawling city. Even in the early morning, the lights of the harbor were vibrant, reflecting off the red wood of the buildings. It was a sight of pure prosperity. Lumen tightened her grip on her sword. She was here to find her brother, and the Geo Archon was her next lead. Wow, Liyue is huge. Paimon flew in circles, distracted by the smell of street food. Grilled fish. Snacks. Everything smells so good. Lumen stood with her hands on her hips, watching her companion drift toward a food stall. Paimon, we have work to do. We're here to find the god of Geo, and the immortal Vinny mentioned. Paimon flew back, looking sheepish. Right. It's just, the food smells so distracting. Vinny said the rite of dissension is the only time we can see the Geo Archon. If we miss today, we have to wait a whole year. Do you know where it's being held? Lumen asked. Maybe today? Or tomorrow? Paimon scratched her head. We should probably ask a local. And remember, don't call him Morix here. The locals find it rude. Call him Rex Lapis. I was walking down the main street when I spotted them. Lumen looked exactly like she did in the stories, determined, curious, and currently trying to navigate the bustling crowds. I decided to make the first move. Look over there. Paimon pointed at me. That guy looks nice. Let's ask him. I watched them approach. Lumen was polite, but Paimon was already waving her little hands. Hello, Paimon chirped. Oh, and what is this interesting little thing? I asked, feigning curiosity. I'm not a thing. I'm Paimon, she shouted, crossing her arms. I smiled. I'm Bai. I'm a consultant for the Wangxing funeral parlor. Lumen bowed slightly. I'm Lumen. This is my best friend, Paimon. We were wondering if you knew when the rite of dissension starts. Outlanders, I take it. I looked at Lumen's clothes. They definitely weren't from the 7 nations. I'm a traveler from another world, Lumen said. She was surprisingly honest. I leaned in a little closer, lowering my voice. A traveler with no vision, yet you carry the power of both Anemo and Geo within you. Interesting. In a flash, Lumen's expression changed. She summoned a dull blade, The tip pointed directly at me. Her eyes were sharp and full of suspicion. No ordinary person should have been able to see the elemental energy inside her. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How do you know that?" I realized I might have flexed a bit too hard. I couldn't exactly tell her I'd seen her story in a video game back on Earth. "I'm just a common citizen of Liyue," I said, turning away as if her sword didn't bother me. "You asked about the right. Follow me. Liyue is a bit of a mess right now. A few days ago, the Yin-Yang Immortal, a being equal to Rex Lapis, vanished without a trace. The Qixing are turning the city upside down looking for him." Lumen lowered her sword, exchanging a confused look with Paimon. They followed me as I walked. "Vanished?" Paimon asked. "Veni told us about him. How could someone that powerful just disappear?" Lumen looked down, her hope flickering. If a godlike being could just vanish, what did that mean for her search for her brother? I kept walking, leading them toward the terrace where everything was about to change. If we wanted to find clues about her brother, our only choice was to seek out the 7 Archons. Every year, during the Rite of Dissension, Rex Lapis would descend to grant his divine predictions and guide Liyue's path for the coming year. This was the land where gods walked among mortals. I turned back to look at Lumen, smiling as I explained the tradition. Just up ahead is Yujing Terrace. That's where the ceremony takes place every year. As it happens, I was heading there to watch the festivities myself. "Why don't you join me?" I turned and began walking. Lumen and Paimon shared a look before following close behind. I could tell Lumen found me mysterious, but she didn't sense any malice in me, so she kept pace. When we reached Yujing Terrace, Paimon excitedly flew ahead to get a better look. Lumen gasped at the sheer size of the crowd. It was a sea of people. Standing at the center was Ningguang, the Tianquan of the Liyue Qixing. "I heard that prayers made on the day of the rite are especially effective," Paimon said, turning to us with wide eyes. "Lumen, Master Qiubai, do you want to try making a wish?" I gave a soft laugh. A wish? At this point in my long life, I didn't have much left to ask for. "I don't have any wishes," I said, glancing at Lumen. "But I think our friend here has something very important on her mind." Lumen nodded solemnly. I didn't need to be a mind reader to know she was wishing to find her brother. "Go on then," I said, pointing toward the large incense burners. "Offer some incense and make your wish." As we approached, a woman dressed in fine silk recognized me. "Oh, if it isn't Mr. Qiubai, the consultant from Wangxing Funeral Parlor. Are you here to soak up some of the divine energy too?" "Miss Changshan," I greeted her with a nod. "It's not for me. My friend here is the one looking for a blessing." I introduced Lumen and Paimon. Changshan smiled warmly at them. "I've already finished my prayers. If you wish today, the Geo Archon and the Ancient Immortals will surely protect you. Here, take my leftover incense. Good luck, little lady." After she left, I rubbed my nose, feeling a bit awkward. Protect her? If I made a wish, would I just be asking myself for protection? That seemed a bit redundant. Lumen placed the incense in the burner and closed her eyes tight, her hands clasped in front of her. I watched her, knowing she was praying for a lead on her brother. Paimon started to fidget, wondering how much longer Lady Ningguang would take to prepare. We squeezed through the crowd toward the center of the terrace. The air was thick with whispers. "Wow, there are so many people." Paimon squeaked. "We need to get closer or we won't see a thing." She zipped forward, and Lumen pushed through the throng after her. I stayed back a bit, watching calmly. As a demon god, my vision was far beyond that of a human. I could see everything perfectly from where I stood. Ningguang stood at the center of the terrace, checking the position of the sun. The time had come. Her attendants bowed and stepped back. Rich geo energy began to swirl around her, forming 4 floating gemstones that orbit her body. With a sharp gesture, she sent the stones crashing into the central incense burner. A pillar of golden light erupted, piercing the clouds and shaking the very foundations of the earth. The sky turned dark in an instant. The wind howled. Then, a massive, half-draconic body tumbled from the clouds, crashing onto the stone altar with a heavy thud. Even though I had seen this scene play out in a game in my past life, seeing it in person was something else entirely. I stroked my chin, watching the chaos. The dragon looked a bit small, didn't it? Well, it was just a shell. If the real Morix had actually fallen from the sky, Half of Liyue Harbor would be a crater right now. Ningguang's expression turned grim. She rushed forward, kneeling to inspect the body. The crowd erupted into panicked murmurs. Ningguang stood up, her face a mask of cold authority. She waved her hand, her voice ringing out across the terrace. Rex Lapis has been murdered. Seal the exits. Do not let anyone leave. Millilith guards flooded the terrace instantly, surrounding the crowd. Don't let any suspicious characters escape, they shouted. Ningguang stood frozen for a moment, staring at the lifeless dragon. I could see the gears turning in her head. If Rex Lapis was dead, what about the Yin Yang Immortal? Was there a power out there capable of assassinating gods? Her eyes grew sharp. Liyue was now a cage. This can't be. Paimon cried, clutching her head. Did she say the Geo Archon is dead? Lumen looked around, her eyes darting between the guards. If the god was dead, her clues were gone. But more importantly, we were currently the most suspicious people in the area. She didn't want to fall into the hands of the authorities, especially if the god of this world was an enemy from her past. She gave me a quick look, then started to slip away toward the exit. Paimon followed, trembling. I stayed exactly where I was. There was no reason for me to run. A Millilith guard approached me, clipboard in hand. Age: 22. I lied smoothly. Identity: consultant for the Wangxing funeral parlor. Name is Chiu Bai. The guard checked his notes and nodded. Everything seems to be in order. You may go, sir. Just as he finished, a shout went up from the other side of the terrace. Stop. Suspicious individuals are fleeing. Catch them. I didn't need to look to know it was Lumen and Paimon. Around me, the citizens of Liyue were breaking down. Some collapsed to their knees, sobbing. First the Yin Yang Immortal disappeared, and now Rex Lapis was dead. The contract of 3,000 years had vanished in a single afternoon. I sighed. The people had relied on us for too long. Liyue needed to grow up, and this was the painful start of that process. Suddenly, I felt a gaze on me. I turned to see Ningguang walking my way. She had been investigating me for days, ever since Keqing mentioned a new, strikingly handsome consultant at the funeral parlor. She knew I was well-versed in history and a close friend of Zhongli, but my past was a total blank. She walked up to the railing where I stood, the wind catching her hair. She seemed surprised to see me so composed. Mr. Chiu Bai, she said, her voice calm but probing. The guards have cleared you. Why do you linger while the city is in such turmoil? I smiled, looking out at the horizon. I'm just enjoying the view. The Millilith didn't say I had to leave immediately, did they? I looked at her, the Tian Quan, a woman who rose from a barefoot girl to the richest person in Teyvat. She was impressive. It's curious, she said, narrowing her eyes, that a simple consultant would have so much to say to someone like me at a time like this. I am honored by your attention, my lady, I said. It wasn't a lie. Right now, I was just a consultant for the Wangxing funeral parlor. To someone like Ningguang, I should have been a nobody. Mr. Chiu Bai, you're being too modest, Ningguang replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied me. I'm just curious. Where do you actually come from? She was suspicious. I could feel it. There were too many mysteries surrounding me, and a woman like her hated variables she couldn't control. I didn't give her a straight answer. Instead, I turned back to the horizon, clasping my hands behind my back. I am merely a consultant, I said softly. At least for now. But I wonder, how will Liyue, the land of the gods, handle the death of its deity? Ningguang froze for a second, caught off guard by the weight of my words. By the time she snapped out of it, I was gone. I had vanished into the crowd. Could he be an adeptus? She whispered to the empty air. She shook the thought away. Her gaze became iron. She was the Tian Quan, the pillar of the people. She couldn't afford to be weak. Rex Lapis and the Yin Yang Immortal might be gone, but the Qixing remained. The era of humans had arrived. Meanwhile, across the city, things were getting chaotic. Lumen and Paimon were running for their lives, cornered by a squad of Millilith guards. Lumen reached for her dull blade, ready to fight her way out. Hey, don't move, a voice called out. A man blurred past them. He moved like water, wielding twin blades infused with hydro energy. In seconds, the guards were on the ground. He wore a fancy scarf and expensive clothes. He looked like he had never lacked a single coin in his life. Follow me, he shouted. Lumen and Paimon didn't have much choice. They ran until their lungs burned, finally losing the guards in the winding back streets. I'm so tired. Paimon wheezed, floating limply in the air. Lumen rolled her eyes. I'm the one who was actually running, Paimon. Hey, Paimon snapped. Using magic to fly is a workout too. She turned to their savior. Anyway, who are you, mister? You can call me child, he said with a grin. Or Tartaglia. Ugh, what a terrible personality, Paimon grumbled. He saves us once and already acts like he's the boss. Lumen stayed on guard. Child, Signora, you're a Fatui harbinger. She stepped in front of Paimon, her hand on her sword. Child just laughed and held up his hands. Relax. I'm not here for a fight. I know Signora left a bad taste in your mouth. Honestly, I don't like her either. Let's just forget her for a moment. I'm here to help. Lumen looked at him with pure disgust. Go away. We don't need help from the Fatui. Child rubbed the back of his head, looking genuinely embarrassed. Ouch. Give me some credit. I might be a bad guy, but I'm not here to cause trouble for you. It took a long time, but Child eventually talked them into following him to the Northland Bank. He handed Lumen a golden slip of paper, a sigil of permission. This is a sign of trust, Child explained. It will keep the mighty and illuminated Adepti from attacking you on sight. The Adepti? Paimon asked, eyes wide. Go north, Child said. Beyond Gili Plains is a forest of stone called Juyin Karst. The people of Liyue believe the Adepti live there. But I don't just believe. I know they exist. I also know that's where the cave of the Inyang Immortal is located. He paused, his voice dropping. Though, I heard that while the Immortal was still sleeping, his body was stolen. Regardless, if anyone can help you now, it's the Adepti in those mountains. He was right. The three great Adepti, Mountain Shaper, Moon Carver, and Cloud Retainer, had already returned there. They had scoured every inch of Liyue looking for my missing body, but they found nothing. Frustrated and grieving, they retreated to their mountain abodes. As for me, I was currently walking through those very same mountains. I wasn't looking for Adepti. I was looking for treasure chests. Every hilichurl and slime in my path was dealt with swiftly. It was embarrassing, really. The great Inyang Immortal was completely broke. 500 years of sleep had made me forget how money worked. Earlier today, I had gone to Shinua kiosk for a meal and realized I didn't have a single mora. If Hu Tao hadn't been there to pay, I would have been washing dishes for a month. Bai, why are you just like Zhongli? She had screamed in my ear. I won't let you pick up his bad habits. Go find some money. And don't break the law. I sighed, rubbing my ears at the memory. I didn't know how to run a business, so opening chests was my only option. I had managed to scavenge about 100,000 mora so far, but it wasn't enough. Maybe I should open a pharmacy? I knew a lot about herbs. But then I realized that would probably hurt Hu Tao's funeral business. If people stayed healthy, she'd lose customers. Bai. I heard a high-pitched shout and turned around. Paimon was waving frantically, with Lumen running close behind. I didn't expect to see you here, my friends, I said, smiling. I was surprised. Had the story already progressed to the point where they were seeking the Adepti? What are you doing here all alone? Lumen asked, looking concerned. Aren't you scared? Yeah. Paimon puffed out her chest. We can protect you. The traveler is super strong. I couldn't help it. I laughed and reached out, patting Paimon's head. Don't worry, little Paimon. I'll be fine. I'm actually quite strong myself, you know. Paimon squeaked and ducked away from my hand, making me chuckle again. It was good to see them. In this changing world, they were a welcome sight. Lumen gave me a look like I was a long-lost friend, but Paimon wasn't having it. She crossed her tiny arms and huffed. Hey, don't touch Paimon's head, she squealed. I'm going to give you a really ugly nickname. I haven't thought of one yet. But once I do, you're in trouble. Lumen covered her mouth, trying to hide her laughter. Paimon turned on her instantly, stomping her feet in the air. Traveler, you're laughing at me too? Stop it. No laughing. The three of us started walking deeper into Juyin Karst, joking and bickering like we'd known each other for years. As we hiked, I kept my eyes peeled. Every time I saw a rare herb, I snatched it up without hesitation. Lumen and Paimon watched me with confused expressions. Finally, I cleared my throat, feeling a bit self-conscious. You asked what I was doing here, right? I rubbed the back of my neck. Well, I'm broke. I'm hoping to gather some high-quality herbs to sell for mora. Lumen let out a giggle she couldn't suppress anymore. So, you walked all the way into the most dangerous part of the mountains alone just because you're short on cash. Bai, you know the Adventurers Guild exists, right? Lumen added kindly. Taking a few commissions would be way easier than this. That's how I afford to feed Paimon. I laughed awkwardly. Honestly, she was right. I hadn't even thought of the guild. 500 years of sleep had completely wiped out my understanding of how a normal person makes a living. Still, I figured I was doing better than a certain socially inept consultant I knew. Don't worry about the details, I said, waving it off to change the subject. What about you two? What brings you to these peaks? They told me the whole story. The rite of dissension, the assassination of Rex Lapis, and how they were being hunted as suspects. They were here to find the Adepti to clear their names. Framed as assassins, huh? I nodded, pretending to be surprised. I'll go with you. I've actually never explored the heart of Julian Karst before. We climbed higher until a booming, majestic voice echoed through the clouds. Who goes there? Why have you trespassed into the sacred realm of Julian Karst? I smiled, turning toward the source of the voice, but my grin froze instantly. My mind went blank. What in the world? Standing before us were three massive, divine creatures. A large brown crane, a magnificent stag, and a white and blue crane. Mountain Shaper, Moon Carver, and Cloud Retainer. Why were all three of them here together? This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. Moon Carver stepped forward, his antlers glowing with power. Lumen didn't hesitate. She pulled out the sigil of permission and held it up. Please, look at this, she said softly. Moon Carver leaned in. A sigil of permission? I haven't seen one of these in ages. To think a mortal still carries a remnant of our power. I am the mighty recliner of the lake, Moon Carver. State your purpose, traveler. While he spoke, Cloud Retainer, the white crane, wasn't looking at Lumen. She was staring directly at me. Her sharp, intelligent eyes scanned me from head to toe. Strange, she whispered. Why do I feel such a sense of familiarity? Have I met this mortal before? I felt a cold sweat break out. I turned my head away, trying to look inconspicuous. I had suppressed my aura to the absolute limit. Unless they were an actual god-level entity, they shouldn't be able to sense a thing. Why is the Adeptus staring at me? I asked, unable to take the pressure. This one simply feels a connection, Cloud Retainer said, turning her head away with an arrogant huff. Fine. If you are so shy, this one shall look elsewhere. I breathed a sigh of relief. That was close. Assassins. They fled this way. A shout erupted from the path behind us. A group of Millilith soldiers came charging up the mountain, led by a stern-faced coach. Sir, we've gone too deep into Julian Karst, one soldier whispered, looking at the three giant divine beasts in terror. The coach looked at the Adepti, then at Lumen. He gulped, but his duty won out over his fear. Capturing the assassin is our top priority. Move in. Moon Carver sighed, disturbing our peace. Send them away, but do not take their lives. Lumen reached for her sword, but I stepped in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked at me, confused. Leave this to me, I said with a small smile. I turned toward the charging soldiers and flicked my wrist. In an instant, the entire squad of Millilith vanished. They didn't fall, they didn't scream. They were just gone. Lumen and Paimon stood there, mouths hanging wide open. Paimon flew to the spot where the soldiers had been, circling it several times before zooming back to my face. What did you do? She shrieked. Where did they go? Did you make them disappear forever? I felt a surge of satisfaction. It felt good to show off a little in front of the traveler. I just sent them back to the entrance of the mountains, I explained calmly. I didn't hurt them. Think of it as a small trick. Lumen looked stunned. A small trick that moves a dozen people miles away in a second? We walked for a whole day to get here. You're amazing. Paimon cheered, kicking her feet in the air. Next time we have to go somewhere far, you can just wave your hand and save us the walk. Lumen sighed, putting her hands on her hips. Paimon, you're missing the point. And you fly anyway. I'm the one who has to do the walking. Behind us, the Adepti were just as shocked. They stared at me with newfound intensity. An Adepti art? Moon Carver mused. And one even we have not seen. How does a mere mortal possess the secret arts of the illuminated? I felt the sweat returning. It's a technique passed down through my family. I didn't even know it was an adepti art. Cloud Retainer narrowed her eyes, still suspicious, so I quickly turned back to the main issue. Sirs, we came here to bring you urgent news. Lumen stepped forward and explained everything. The death of Rex Lapis and the chaos in Liyue Harbor. What did you say? Mountain Shaper roared, his wings spreading wide in fury. The Lord of Geo. Assassinated? Moon Carver staggered back, his voice trembling with disbelief. Absurd. Preposterous. What power in this world could possibly slay the prime of Adepti? And to frame a common traveler, while the Qixing hide the truth, they have disappointed us for the last time. Moon Carver closed his eyes, his mind racing to process the tragedy. Lumen took a brave step forward. Do any of you have news regarding the Great Immortal? The one they call the Sovereign? The three Adepti looked at each other, their grief doubling. First their Sovereign, now their Emperor. The Sovereign vanished centuries ago, Moon Carver said heavily. We searched every corner of Liyue, every mountain, and every sea. We never found a trace. Cloud Retainer's grief turned into a cold, sharp fury. She looked toward the horizon, her voice trembling with anger. She wanted to suppress Liyue Harbor. She wanted to crush it before more chaos could spread. Pai Meng and Ing stared at her, eyes wide with terror. Suppress it? Pai Meng squeaked. You mean destroy the whole city? Cloud Retainer didn't flinch. She called it a necessary measure to stop the rot. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stepped forward and looked her in the eye. We came here to ask for protection, not destruction, I said firmly. At least listen to what the people have to say first. The other two Adepti, Li Shui and Shuiyu, shared a long look. They were more level-headed. They decided we needed a plan before anyone started tearing down cities. They told us to take the Sigil of Permission and find the Conqueror of Demons, a man named Xiao. Then, with a sweep of their wings, they vanished into the clouds. Lu Yin gave me one last, lingering look before she disappeared. Where is this Conqueror of Demons? Ing asked, rubbing her temples. I smiled. I knew exactly where he was. I also knew his karmic debt was getting worse. Once this mess was over, I planned to help him. But for now, we had to move. Walking would take too long. I told them to grab my sleeves. Hold on tight, I warned. One dizzying flash later, the mountain air was gone. We were standing in front of Wanshuan. The evening lights were glowing, reflecting off the quiet waters of Dihua Marsh. I looked at the massive structure and felt a pang of memory. 1,000 years ago, this place was a wasteland of demons and fallen gods. Xiao had spent centuries cleaning up the filth alone. It was a heavy burden for one soul. Pai Meng was screaming, calling me a walking statue of the seven because of the teleportation. I just laughed it off. I told her it wasn't a big deal, but she wouldn't stop complaining about how I kept secrets. Everyone has secrets, Pai Meng, Ing said softly, patting her head. It's not polite to pry. Pai Meng pouted, but her mood shifted the moment she smelled food. Her stomach let out a loud growl. Then, Ying's stomach growled too. She turned bright red, looking down at her feet. I couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. Come on, I said. This meal is on me. Pai Meng's face lit up instantly. She started cheering, calling me the best friend she ever had. We headed inside, but I stopped near the stairs. I looked up toward the highest balcony. Before we eat, we have to go up there, I said. Pai Meng groaned, complaining that food was more important than anything else. Ing had to remind her why we were here in the first place. We climbed the wooden stairs until we reached the top terrace. The view was breathtaking. The wind brushed past my face, carrying the scent of the marsh and silk flowers. It was peaceful, but I felt a presence. To the mortal eye, what is seen is not necessarily true. The voice was cold and sudden. A young man appeared out of thin air right next to Ing. Pai Meng let out a shriek and nearly fell over. Ing jumped back, clutching her chest in shock. It was him, the Conqueror of Demons. Xiao. I stood back and let my divine sense sweep over him. My heart sank. I could see the darkness clinging to his soul like a thick, oily shroud. The karmic debt was eating him alive from the inside out. At this rate, he wouldn't last another century. He was a warrior at the end of his rope, and he didn't even know I was watching him. If Xiao stayed like this, his karma would eventually consume him. To me, that darkness was nothing. I had the power to wipe it out in an instant with a single strike from the records of infinite hits. But for now, I kept my hands down. Xiao looked at the sigil of permission in Ying's hand. His eyes flickered with a hint of surprise. He realized we had come prepared. Still, his expression remained icy. He told us the sigil only meant he wouldn't hurt us himself, but it didn't mean we were safe. Leave now, Xiao said coldly. Mortal souls are fragile. You cannot handle the spiritual pressure of an adeptus. Your blood cannot carry this level of divine energy. I am saying this for your own good. Pai Meng scratched her head, looking completely lost. Xiao didn't care if she understood or not. He turned his back on us, ready to vanish back into the shadows. Wait a second, Pai Meng shouted. But before she could finish her sentence, Xiao was gone. He vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but a faint swirl of dark energy behind. I stretched my arms and looked at the empty space where he had been. Xiao was right about mortals, but he didn't realize who he was talking to. He's so rude. Pai Meng stomped her foot in the air. He just talks to himself and leaves. I want to give him a terrible nickname. But what if he gets mad and makes sure I only find cabbage in treasure chests from now on? She shuddered at the thought and grabbed her forehead. I let out a soft laugh. It was time to get to work. Let's go find the boss of the inn, I suggested. She might know how to actually talk to him. Right? Qiu Bai is always the smart one, Pai Meng said, her mood flipping instantly. We headed down to the main counter. The lobby was filled with the scent of polished wood and expensive tea. A small cat sat on the desk, watching us with bored eyes. Behind the counter stood a woman with a professional smile. Hello there, she said, eyeing us. A traveler, a strange floating companion, and Mr. Qiu Bai. I raised an eyebrow. I hadn't been to Wangshuin since I woke up from my long slumber. How did she know my name? Then I remembered. She was likely one of Ningguang's eyes and ears. The Tianquan kept a close watch on everyone. I'm honored the boss of Wangshuin knows who I am, I said, giving a polite nod. You're too modest, she replied. My name is Vergoldet. Is there something I can help you with? Ing stepped forward and asked about the adeptus on the roof. Goldet seemed surprised that we had actually managed to see him. She told us that even she, living here year-round, rarely caught a glimpse of the conqueror of demons. Is he always that grumpy? Pai Meng asked, holding her head. He's actually in a good mood today if he spoke to you, Goldet explained. The Adepti fought for Liyue thousands of years ago, but they only know how to fight. Humans took over the trade and the laws, while the Adepti stayed in the shadows. Most people spend their whole lives without ever meeting one. Pai Meng looked at me, then back at Goldet. She didn't realize she was standing next to a literal god of Liyue. To her, we had already seen 4 Adepti in a single day. It didn't seem that rare at all. So, any advice on how to get him to talk? I asked. You have to make him happy, Goldet said with a shrug. Though, to be honest, I've never seen him smile. The last time Xiao smiled was probably 500 years ago, I muttered under my breath. Goldet froze. She looked at me with a sharp, questioning gaze. I hadn't told her how I knew that. Even Pai Meng looked confused. I just gave them a mysterious grin. I knew exactly what Xiao liked. Don't worry about it, I said. Let's go find the chef. We need a plate of almond tofu and a few of Ying's best home-cooked dishes. Goldet watched us as we walked away. I could feel her eyes on my back, full of suspicion and wonder. She was probably wondering if I was an adeptus myself. She wasn't entirely wrong. I swept my divine sense across the inn. I bypassed the merchants and the elites discussing business in the dining hall. I was looking for one specific person. Found him, I whispered. Found who? Ing asked. Follow me. I led them to a balcony on the lower level. The night air was cool, and the lights of Dihua Marsh shimmered in the distance. A large, muscular man stood there, staring out at the water. This was Yin Xiao, the inn's chef. Excuse me, Ing said softly. Are you the chef? I'm on break. The man grunted without turning around. Don't bother me. He had a face that looked like it was carved out of stone. He didn't look like a cook. He looked like a bandit. We were hoping for some almond tofu. Ing tried again. I said, don't bother me. Yin Xiao snapped, crossing his arms. Pai Meng leaned over to me and whispered loudly. Wow, his customer service is just as bad as that blacksmith back in Mondstadt. The chef's hospitality was exactly like the blacksmith back in Mondstadt. I noticed the way he stood, his shoulders tense, his eyes darting around like he was waiting for a predator to strike. He wasn't just being rude. He was terrified. Is this about the order from Boss Goldit? I asked smoothly. Yin Zhao's face shifted instantly. The aggression vanished, replaced by a forced, polite smile. It was like watching a chameleon change colors. Ing and Pai Ming stared at him, blinking in confusion at the sudden transformation. The boss's orders? He said, his voice softening. Well, that's different. I can't exactly say no to her. He sighed, his bravado crumbling. But I'm useless right now. I can't make something as delicate as almond tofu. Why not? Pai Ming asked. Yin Xiao looked at her like she was missing a brain cell. A chef's hands must be steady, just like a swordsman's. But look at me. I'm shaking. There are rumors this inn is haunted, and just now, in the kitchen, I saw something. Something that wasn't human. Pai Ming whispered to us that for a guy who looked like a bandit, he sure was a coward when it came to ghosts. Ing looked skeptical, wondering if ghosts even existed in this world. I just smiled. I knew exactly what was going on. If the inn isn't safe, Yin Xiao muttered, I can't focus. My hands won't stop trembling. Don't worry, Yin Xiao, I said, giving him a reassuring nod. Leave it to us. We'll go check the kitchen. We headed down to the kitchen area. It was quiet, the air thick with the smell of spices and old wood. Pai Ming looked around, crossing her arms. See? There's nothing here. He's just seeing things. She cut off with a scream. A small, transparent, glowing figure of a young girl darted from behind the stove. She was fast, a blur of pale light. Pai Ming scrambled behind me, clutching her chest in terror. Even Ing froze, her eyes wide as she watched the spot where the girl had vanished. I didn't panic. I let my divine energy flow, a mist of ink black and pure white swirling around my fingers. I flicked my hand, and the energy expanded, coating the entire kitchen like a veil. My power forced the spiritual realm to manifest in the physical. The little girl reappeared. She was standing by a vegetable rack, hopping up and down. She looked at me with curious, wide eyes. Ing and Pai Ming stayed glued to my back, keeping a safe distance. The girl began to sing a nursery rhyme in a tiny, eerie voice. Big Choo-Choo is sick, second Choo-Choo looks. Third Choo-Choo gathers herbs, fourth Choo-Choo cooks. I rubbed my temples. This kid had definitely spent too much time around Hu Tao before she died. Haunting people isn't nice, little one. Pai Ming shouted from behind my shoulder, trying to sound brave. Are you listening? The girl stopped hopping and looked at us. Okay, Ming won't play tricks on the guests anymore. She tilted her head at me. Big brother, your energy feels fun. Next time, you come play with Ming. If you don't, Ming will come find you. I laughed softly. I'll come play next time. But no more scaring the chef, all right? Ming giggled, her form flickering. Ming understands. Thank you, big brother. With a final hop, she vanished into thin air. Pai Ming and Ing stared at me like I was the scary one. You're actually going to play with a ghost? Pai Ming asked, shivering. That's terrifying. Problem solved, I said, turning back toward the stairs. Let's go tell the boss. We returned to the counter. When I explained what happened, Goldit looked surprised. You actually handled the ghost? I'm impressed. That little girl is Ming. Xiao asked us to look after her, but her pranks were becoming a real headache for the business. It's fine now, I told her. I've left a trace of my aura around the inn. No restless spirits will be bothering your guests anymore. Pai Ming's eyes lit up. So that black and white mist was a ward? I didn't know you were an exorcist too. Ing didn't say much, but I could feel her gaze on me. Between the teleporting and the way I handled spirits, I knew she was starting to realize I wasn't just some ordinary consultant from the Wangxing funeral parlor. Goldit, too, looked at me with newfound respect. She probably suspected I was an adeptus. In her world, only the divine could command spirits with such ease. Now, I said, looking at my friends, let's go get that almond tofu. We went back to Yin Xiao. When I told him the ghost was gone, he nearly dropped his ladle. Really? You're sure? Positive, I said. She won't be scaring anyone else. Yin Xiao let out a massive breath of relief. A genuine smile finally broke through his gruff exterior. Give me a moment to steady my nerves. I'll make you the smoothest, finest almond tofu you've ever tasted. I promise you'll be satisfied. Can we borrow the kitchen after? Ing asked. We need to prepare a dish of our own. Yin Xiao laughed heartily. Of course. After what you did for me, you can have the whole kitchen if you want. Pai Ming was already drooling. Finally, once the immortal gets his food, it's our turn to feast. The change in Yin Xiao's attitude was incredible. Just a moment ago, he was a trembling mess, but now he was back to his professional self. I suppose it's hard for anyone to find the passion to cook when they think a ghost is breathing down their neck. We followed him into the kitchen. He gestured toward a nearby table with a nod. I'll get to work immediately. You three sit and rest. It won't be long. Thank you, I said, offering a polite nod. I turned to Ing and lowered my voice. It'll be your turn soon, Ing. Make sure you show off your best skills. She tilted her head, looking a bit puzzled. Bai, why does it have to be my cooking? The chef here is already amazing. I gave her a knowing smile. In the future, I remembered, Xiao was always just a call away for her. That bond probably started right here, with a simple meal. You don't understand, Ing. A handmade gift shows more sincerity. Who knows? You might just capture an adeptus's heart. Ying's face flushed a deep crimson. She puffed out her cheeks in a pout. Bai, you're teasing me again. I let out a hearty laugh and took my seat. Paimon, however, wasn't letting me off the hook. She hovered close, her large eyes scanning me with intense curiosity. Bai, are you actually an adeptus or something? How do you know all these magical tricks? She couldn't hold it back anymore. Between me appearing out of thin air and teleporting across distances, she and Ing had never seen anything like it. Why don't you guess, little Paimon? I teased. Paimon crossed her arms, looking frustrated. I give up. There are too many suspicious things about you. I'll just wait until the day you decide to tell us yourself. She lost interest in me and turned to watch Yin Xiao. Beside her, Ing was watching too, a faint smile on her face as she carefully observed the chef's technique. She looked like a student trying to steal a secret recipe. I caught myself staring at her profile. I hadn't noticed it before, but she was truly stunning. Back when I played the game, I always chose her, though I remembered wishing the dialogue options were a bit different. Ing felt my gaze and touched her cheek, looking confused. What is it, Bai? Why are you staring? You're very cute, Ing, I said simply, keeping the smile on my lips. Her face went from pink to bright red in a second. She spun around instantly, refusing to look me in the eye. I rubbed my nose awkwardly, feeling a bit embarrassed myself. Meanwhile, Paimon was stomping her feet in excitement, already imagining the feast she'd get Ing to make later. Time slipped by. Finally, Yin Xiao called out that the dish was ready. The aroma of almond tofu filled the entire kitchen. He walked over and placed the plate on our table with a satisfied grin. My hands are steady again, he said. The kitchen is yours now. Use whatever ingredients you need. I need to go find the boss for a moment, so if you'll excuse me. Much appreciated, I told him. Paimon flew over the plate, inhaling deeply. It smells so good. I want a bite right now. She reached out, drooling. Ing quickly pulled the plate away. Paimon, no. This is for the adeptus. No stealing. Paimon stomped the air, huffing. I was just smelling it. I wasn't going to eat it. Ing went to work on her own dishes, but she kept a sharp eye on me, making sure I kept Paimon away from the almond tofu. Paimon glared at me like I was a prison guard. I just laughed at her expression and tried to comfort her. Don't worry, little Paimon. Once we're done, I'll have the chef make you a giant meal. Just hang in there. Paimon clapped her hands, suddenly happy again. Eventually, Ing finished her cooking and stored the steaming dishes in her bag. She looked at us and nodded. It's ready. Let's go find him. We headed up to the balcony. This time, Xiao didn't vanish. He was standing there silently, looking out at the horizon. He sensed us and turned his head, his gaze cold and indifferent. You again, he muttered. Wait, don't disappear yet. Paimon yelled. Ing stepped forward, holding out the plate of almond tofu. Zhao's eyes widened slightly when he saw it. This is your favorite, Paimon explained quickly. And this is a special salad made by this traveler from another world. It's a specialty. Ing handed over the food. Xiao took it and began to eat in silence. As he ate, Ing took the opportunity to explain everything that had happened in Liyue Harbor. I stood back, watching him closely. Even while eating, he was constantly exerting effort to suppress the karmic debt racking his body. The pain must have been unimaginable. When he finished, he looked at us, his expression one of pure disbelief. Rex Lapis suffered such a fate? I cannot imagine it. No matter how the eras change, I never envisioned a Liyue without its Archon. He looked toward the distant lake, his voice low. And the Qixing who govern the mortal realm. What role did they play in this? I will go find the other 3 perfected lords. It is time for a decision to be made. Will they go and confront the Qixing? Paimon asked nervously. Adepti do not shirk their responsibilities, Xiao replied. I have my reasons for avoiding the mortal world, but duty is duty. Our god is the god of contracts, after all. Paimon raised a hand. Wait. One last question. Who was that little girl, Ming? Xiao looked at her. When I hunt demons, I occasionally encounter spirits who have never harmed anyone but cannot yet pass on. I asked the boss here to look after her for a while. Paimon gasped. So the inn is a foster home for ghosts? Their business goes way deeper than I thought. Suddenly, Zhao's gaze shifted to me. His eyes turned sharp, filled with open hostility. You are dangerous. Whatever your purpose is, if you harm the people of Liyue, I will not let you go. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him and smiled. Xiao, you can barely suppress the karma inside you anymore, can you? Xiao froze, shock flashing through his eyes. I turned to my friends. Ing, Paimon, go wait for me outside. I have something I need to say to him in private. Behind me, Ing and Paimon looked at me with deep concern. Be careful, Xiao Bai, Ing whispered. She could tell something was wrong, so she took Paimon and stepped outside to give us space. Xiao didn't move. His gaze was locked onto mine, sharp and dangerous. Who exactly are you? He demanded. How do you know the state of my body? I sighed, rubbing my forehead. I couldn't reveal my identity yet. I saw the constant agony he was enduring from the karmic debt, and I just wanted to help him find some peace. I'm sorry, Xiao. I can't tell you that right now. His eyes narrowed. In that case, show me your strength. In a flash, the primordial jade wing spear appeared in his hand. He lunged at me, his strike fueled by anima energy and the dark weight of his karma. The air around him turned into a storm of wind and malice. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I calmly raised my hand and caught the blade of his spear between 2 fingers. The shock on Zhao's face was priceless. He had poured his power into that strike, yet I held it still with 0 effort. If I hadn't suppressed the shockwave of our collision, the entire Wangshu Inn would have been leveled. Xiao, calm down, I said softly. I flicked my fingers, sending the spear flying back into his grip. He caught it, his hostility replaced by pure bewilderment. He looked at me, searching for any sign of a threat, but I gave him nothing but a calm smile. He had only seen me once, 1,000 years ago. To the current Xiao, I was a complete mystery. He eventually vanished his spear. Whoever you are, if you dare strike at Liyue, I will not let you go. Right, I muttered. For now, just get some sleep. Before he could react, I flicked behind him. A quick strike to the back of his neck sent him into unconsciousness. As he slumped, I caught him and immediately funneled pure life energy into his body. The red and black karma swirling inside him instantly shrank, half of it vanishing into nothing. I stopped there. If I cleared it all at once, he would become too suspicious. I decided to wait until this current crisis was over before fully cleansing him. For now, this would be enough to stop the pain. I blurred his memory of the last few seconds and walked out. Outside, Ing and Paimon were pacing back and forth. When they saw me, they rushed over. Xiao Bai, are you okay? Paimon squeaked. We heard a huge bang back there. I'm fine. I laughed, waving it off. We just had a little chat. Ing sighed in relief. That's good. We've been busy for 2 days and Paimon is starving. Let's find the boss and get some food. I want that almond tofu. My treat, I said. Eat whatever you want. Yay. I'm not holding back. Paimon cheered, clapping her hands. We headed to Vergoldet's counter. She looked at us with genuine surprise. I can't believe Xiao actually spoke to you. People usually wait a lifetime for a glimpse of him, even with almond tofu in hand. We'd like to order, boss, Paimon said, bouncing on her heels. I stepped forward. Bring us 8 of your signature dishes, a plate of almond tofu, some juice, and your best wine. Vergoldet smiled. Right away, Mr. Xiao Bai. A short while later, we were tucked away in a private room, feasting. After we finished, I used a small technique to transport us back to Liyue Harbor instantly. I'm so full. Paimon groaned, rubbing her belly. That almond tofu was amazing. No wonder the Adeptus likes it. Ing nodded, looking at me warmly. Thank you, Chiobai. Don't mention it. We're friends, I replied. So what's next for you two? We have to find Child, Ing explained. He's the Fatui harbinger who gave us this task. Since we finished it, we need to report back. Child, huh? I nodded. I have some business to attend to then. I hope you clear your names soon. If you need me, I'll be at the Wangxing funeral parlor. If I'm not there, just talk to the girl at the front, Iguan. I waved goodbye and walked toward Bubu Pharmacy. As I approached the entrance, a very familiar aura hit me. It was Chi-Chi. 500 years ago, the other Adepti and I had sealed her in amber to stabilize her chaotic energy. I knew that once her power settled, she would eventually break free. I pushed open the door and saw her standing behind the counter next to Baiju. Chi-Chi stared at me, her large eyes filled with a quiet curiosity. I scanned her with my divine sense and realized her condition was much better than I expected. Her body had fully transitioned into an Adeptus physique, though her mind remained frozen at the moment of her death. Mr. Chiobai, consultant of the Wangxing funeral parlor, Baiju said, smiling as he greeted me. What a surprise. Welcome to Bubu Pharmacy. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't realize you knew who I was, Boss Baiju. The honor is all mine, I replied, maintaining my composure. I wasn't just here for a chat. I reached out and placed a massive pile of herbs onto the counter. These weren't ordinary plants. They grew on the highest, most treacherous cliffs of Juyin Karst. Because they lived in high altitudes and absorbed the faint traces of adeptal energy there, their medicinal properties were legendary. The people of Liyue called them immortal grass. Baiju froze. His eyes widened as he looked at the sheer volume of rare herbs I had produced out of thin air. He knew better than anyone that the deep reaches of Juyin Karst were forbidden to mortals. Legend said the Adepti lived there. Most of these plants only grew in places no human could reach without a death wish. Brother Chiobai, Baiju stammered, his voice filled with shock. Are you really planning to sell all of these to me? I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling a bit awkward. To be honest, I'm a little short on mora lately. I need the cash. Baiju didn't hesitate. These herbs were invaluable for his research. Please wait here. I will give you a very fair price. A more than fair price. He quickly signaled his assistants to move the herbs into the back room for valuation. I thanked him and took a seat on one of the wooden chairs in the lobby. As I waited, I felt a small presence approaching. Chi-Chi walked out from behind the counter. She stopped right in front of me, tilting her head. She pressed a finger to her lips, looking like she was trying to solve a complex puzzle. What is it, Chi-Chi? I asked softly. What are you thinking about? She blinked her large, vacant eyes. Big brother knows Chi-Chi's name? I do, I smiled. Also, she whispered, her voice small and crisp. Big brother smells very nice. Chi-Chi likes it. My heart ached for her. I reached out my left hand toward her. Chi-Chi, give me your hand. Let's play a game. She looked into my eyes and slowly placed her tiny hand in mine. I didn't hesitate. I circulated my divine origin energy, the pure, purifying power of Yang. I let it flow gently through her palm, surging into her cold, stagnant body. Warm, Chi-Chi murmured. Her expression began to shift. Chi-Chi is so warm. It's hot. Strange. Chi-Chi usually hates hot things. Her voice was changing. The flat, robotic tone was melting away, replaced by genuine emotion. A spark of light flickered in her eyes, clearing the fog of 500 years. My energy triggered her deepest memories. She saw the images of the Adepti and the Lord of Yin and Yang saving her life during the Great Catastrophe. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. She touched her face in wonder. Warm things, tears. The floodgates opened. Her memories rushed back like a tidal wave. Her parents. Juyin Karst. The kind big brother from her past. The cold feeling of death. The amber. Baiju. The pharmacy. Even the warm, Hu Tao and her obsession with coconut milk. It all came back. I let go of her hand. Her soul was no longer fragile. It was as resilient as an adeptus. The vision on her hat glowed with a brilliance I hadn't seen in centuries. In this moment, She had truly become a three-eyed five-kindred adeptus. Chi-Chi looked up at me and gave me a sweet, radiant smile. She knew exactly who I was. I was the god of yin and yang, the one her parents had told her stories about. Big brother, she said, her smile widening through her tears. You really are an amazing god. I stared at her, stunned. In all my time, I had never seen Chi-Chi smile like that. Even though she was 500 years old, her mind was still that of a young girl. You caught me, I whispered, reaching out to pat her head. But it's a secret, okay? Don't tell anyone. I have something very important to finish first. Chi-Chi leaned into my hand like a content kitten. Chi-Chi won't tell. Just then, Baiju walked back into the room. Brother Chiu-Bai, we've finished the valuation. He stopped mid-sentence, staring at us. It seems Chi-Chi really likes you. The small snake around Baiju's neck hissed in surprise. Chi-Chi is smiling. Baiju was speechless. He had never seen her show this much emotion. Chi-Chi turned toward him and bowed slightly. Brother Baiju, thank you for taking care of me all these years. Baiju looked like he had seen a ghost. Chi-Chi, you seem different. Chi-Chi is a person now, she said happily. I have warmth. I have memories. I don't need my notebook anymore. I watched them from the side. She was a person, yes, but an adeptus first. I knew Baiju had his own reasons for keeping her close, but he had never truly hurt her. Still, she needed proper guidance. I decided I would take her to see Street Ward Rambler, Madame Ping. She needed to learn how to control this new surge of power. Brother Chiu-Bai, Baiju asked, turning to me with suspicion. Do you know what happened here? I had to play it cool. How could I have that kind of power? While you were inside, an adeptus appeared. He helped her and said he was here to take her away. Before he could ask more, I flicked my wrist. A white-robed figure stepped through the front door. It was my avatar, the Lord of Yin and Yang. Chi-Chi looked at the avatar, then back at me, her little head spinning. Two big brothers? The pharmacy staff froze. None of them had ever seen a real adeptus before. The figure's face was obscured by a faint divine mist, exactly how the legends described the god of Liyue. I have come for you, my avatar said, his voice echoing with authority. You are no longer bound by the fate of a zombie. Your life as a mortal is over. I will take you where you belong. Come with me, my avatar said. Chi-Chi turned back to look at me, her eyes wide and uncertain. I gave her a reassuring smile, nodding slowly. Seeing my support, she stepped toward the door while Baiju stood there, completely stunned. Great Immortal, please wait. Baiju called out, his voice cracking with emotion. Will she ever come back? He looked at the little girl with genuine sorrow. Despite his secrets, he had treated her like his own daughter for years. Chi-Chi stopped and looked back, her own expression softening with sadness. Brother Baiju, Chi-Chi will come back, she promised. Of course she will. My avatar spoke, his voice calm and steady. I never said I was taking her forever. I am simply bringing her to adapt to her new power. Once she is ready, she will return. Baiju let out a massive sigh of relief. He bowed deeply, his hands clasped in respect. Then I thanked the immortal. I only wish for her to be well. Act as if you never saw me, my avatar warned. Do not speak of this to outsiders. With a flick of my sleeve, the avatar and Chi-Chi vanished in a flash of light. The pharmacy staff finally stood up, looking completely dazed. One of them nudged the other. Hey, pinch me. Am I dreaming? It's not a dream, the other whispered, staring at the empty space. We actually met a real adeptus. They looked at each other in disbelief, but both knew better than to gossip. The immortal's warning carried the weight of a mountain. Baiju still looked confused, but he shook it off and turned to me. I was standing there as if nothing had happened. Brother Chiu-Bai, we've finished tallying your herbs. He handed me a large, heavy box. Here is 2 million mora. It's a fair price for such rare specimens. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I knew the herbs were good, but 2 million? That was a fortune. I realized Baiju was likely paying extra as a favor, perhaps sensing I was more than I appeared. This money would keep me living comfortably for a very long time. If you find more, please bring them to me, Baiju said with a professional smile. I guarantee you a price that satisfies. I appreciate it, Brother Baiju, I replied, shaking his hand. I won't disturb you any longer. I have things to attend to. Farewell. I bowed and turned to leave. I had been gone for a while, and I knew Hu Tao was probably losing her mind wondering where I was. As soon as I disappeared from sight, Baiju collapsed into a chair like a deflated balloon. The sheer amount of information he had to process today was overwhelming. Night began to fall over Liyue Harbor. Thousands of red lanterns lit up the streets, casting a warm glow over the ancient stone architecture. At Yujing Terrace, Madame Ping was quietly watering her flowers when she suddenly gasped. I had appeared before her with Chi-Chi in tow. The old woman rubbed her eyes, staring at my avatar. My old eyes must be failing me. Lord of Yin and Yang. Shoo, I whispered. Streetward Rambler, I cannot reveal my identity yet. Chi-Chi poked her head out from behind my legs, staring curiously at the kind old grandmother. Suddenly, Madame Ping's form shimmered. The elderly woman vanished, replaced by a beautiful young woman in green robes with white floral patterns. She looked youthful and elegant, a far cry from the tea-serving granny the city knew. The little girl from 500 years ago, Madame Ping whispered, looking at Chi-Chi in shock. She has ascended to adeptitude? Chi-Chi tilted her head. She couldn't understand how a grandma had suddenly become a big sister. It is good to see you safe, my lord, Madame Ping said, smiling at me. If you are well, then Rex Lapis must be safe too, right? I'm fine, I said, neither confirming nor denying the rumors of Morix's death. But please, don't tell the other adepti about me yet. It isn't the right time. She nodded understandingly. I won't say a word. But this little girl, she is quite interesting. She knelt down to Chi-Chi's level. Tell me, little one, what is your name? Chi-Chi gripped my pant leg tightly, still shy. I patted her head. It's okay, Chi-Chi. This big sister is an adeptus too. Chi-Chi finally stepped out. I am. Chi-Chi. Madame Ping laughed, clearly charmed by the girl's cuteness. She reached out and ruffled Chi-Chi's hair. That old grandmother look really doesn't suit you, I teased. I've lived a long time, my lord, she replied with a smile. Even if we can change our appearance, we can't change the age of our hearts. I chuckled. I still didn't get why she chose to be an old lady when Morix, who was over 6,000 years old, insisted on looking like a handsome young consultant. I brought her here so you could teach her to control the energy in her body, I said, looking down at Chi-Chi's tattered clothes. And maybe find her something new to wear. She looks like a little zombie right now, not an adeptus. Leave it to me, Madame Ping said. She pulled out a small, ornate teapot. Chi-Chi, look at this pot and think about going inside. It contains its own world. We can train there without anyone watching. Chi-Chi looked at me for permission. I nodded. She touched the teapot, and in a flash of light, she was pulled inside the Serenidia pot. Thank you, Pinger, I said softly. The night wind caught my white robes. For a moment, Madame Ping stared at me, lost in thought. No wonder Cloud Retainer is so obsessed with you, she muttered to herself before smiling. I will begin her training immediately. She turned into a streak of light and entered the teapot, leaving it resting quietly on a stone table. I nodded to the pot, then vanished into a blur of white light. A moment later, I was walking through the busy streets of Liyue toward the Wangxing funeral parlor. My avatar's energy merged back into my main body as I walked. Chi-Chi's situation was finally settled. As I reached the doors of the funeral parlor, I saw Hu Tao sitting on a chair, surrounded by her worried employees. Where is he? She paced frantically. Why isn't Xiaobai back yet? What if something happened to him? Hu Tao suddenly stood up. She paced back and forth, her eyes filled with anxiety. Director, Zhongli said calmly from his seat. Based on common logic, Xiaobai will be fine. With his current strength, there is very little in this world that could actually hold him back. Hu Tao slammed her hands onto the table, leaning in until she was inches from Zhongli's face. Her unique, plum blossom eyes stared him down. How do you know he's okay? She blurted out. What if something actually happened? I finally found a consultant who saves me half the trouble of running this place. He can't just disappear. As quickly as her fire had flared up, it died down. She deflated like a popped balloon and slumped onto the table. Zhongli seemed to sense something. He looked at the sulking girl and let out a soft, rare chuckle. Director, he is already on his way back. Hu Tao squinted at him suspiciously. You didn't even see him. What? Do you have super hearing or something? The door creaked open. I'm back, I said, stepping into the room. Hu Tao jumped as if she'd been electrocuted. She ran over to me, circling me and inspecting every inch of my clothes to make sure I wasn't hurt. Then she looked back at Zhongli. She was clearly wondering if he actually did have magic ears. Zhongli offered me a faint smile. You've returned, old friend. I nodded back at him. Qiu Bai, where did you go? Hu Tao asked, her hand on her chin. You didn't even tell us you were leaving. Don't worry, director, I said with a smile. Nothing can happen to me. I meant it. Aside from the mysterious heavenly principles, I was confident that no one in this world could stop me. Fine, but tell me next time, Hu Tao huffed. You had me worried. Anyway, where's the mora? Did you get the mora? She stared at my robes, looking for any sign of a coin pouch. I smiled and flipped my hand. A heavy wooden chest materialized on the floor in front of her. I went to gather some rare herbs to sell, I explained. There are 2 million mora in this chest. Hu Tao's jaw dropped so low she could have fit an egg in her mouth. 2 million? How many herbs did you have to pick to make that much in 2 days? She looked at the chest, then glanced at Zhongli. I was clearly the reliable one now. Zhongli noticed her gaze and cleared his throat awkwardly. It is getting late, Zhongli said, his voice steady. We should all rest. I'm exhausted from waiting for Qiu Bai anyway. Hu Tao yawned, heading for the stairs. Zhongli, you have to prepare for the rite of parting tomorrow. Don't stay up too late. Once she was gone, I sat down across from Zhongli. I poured myself a cup of tea and took a slow sip. Morix, I said quietly. I saw Xiao today. Zhongli's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. He doesn't know who I am, I continued. I knocked him unconscious and managed to strip away a small portion of his karmic debt. It should ease his suffering for a while. Once everything is settled, I'll clear it completely. I knew that as long as Xiao kept fighting monsters born from the remains of dead gods, the karma would return. But even a temporary reprieve was the greatest gift I could give him. I failed them, Zhongli said. For the first time in thousands of years, a flicker of guilt crossed his face. If I had arrived sooner back then. Don't blame yourself, Morix, I said softly. You did everything you could. You were tied up in Kenria. You couldn't have been in 2 places at once. Zhongli looked at me and offered a small, appreciative smile. Thank you, friend. Relax, I told him. It's time to fix your erosion. This was the second time I was performing the ritual. I suspected that after a few more sessions, the wear and tear on his soul would be completely gone. I am ready, he said. I waved my hand, creating a barrier to block any outside prying eyes. Then, I channeled the power of Yang into his body. A warm, white divine light flowed into him. Just like last time, Zhongli's eyes glazed over as his memories flashed before him like shattered glass. To him, it felt like standing on the peak of Jian Karst with a gentle breeze brushing his face. After half an hour, I pulled my hand back. Zhongli opened his eyes. The cracks in his soul, the weight of thousands of years, had healed a little more. Thank you, old friend, Zhongli said. You should rest. I imagine repairing erosion is no easy task. It's fine, I replied. You should sleep too. I started to get up, but Zhongli spoke again. Tomorrow, an executive from Snezhnaya has invited me to dinner at Liali Pavilion. Would you like to come along? A Fatui harbinger? I asked. Are you planning to use him to test the Liyue Qixing? I knew the plot. Zhongli was using Child as a golden goose to trigger the release of Ozhel, the overlord of the vortex. He wanted to see if Liyue could stand on its own feet without a god. Ningguang and the others were already on high alert because the Anemo Archon's Gnosis had been stolen in Mondstadt. Everything was moving according to Zhongli's plan. Exactly, Zhongli said, sipping his tea. The traveler will also be there. The traveler. I thought back to my time in the mountains. I ran into them near Jian Karst. We traveled together for a bit. I suppose we are friends. Then it is settled, Zhongli said. A person who crossed the sea of stars to get here. Perhaps I should get to know them better as well. I nodded. I'll go with you. You should get some rest, I said to myself as I headed up to my room in the loft. I looked around the space. It was spotless. I hadn't expected Hu Tao to keep it so clean. It was getting late. Since I transmigrated to this world, life hadn't been half bad. I lay down with a small smile, thinking about everything that had happened since I arrived. Before I knew it, I was out cold. Morning light hit my face the next day. I sat up and let a flash of spiritual light ripple through me. Instantly, the dust vanished from my clothes and my messy hair snapped back into place. I walked downstairs. Zhongli was already there, sipping tea and reading a book. "You're awake, old friend," he said calmly. "Are you ready?" "I'm ready," I replied. "But I don't see Director Hu Tao. Where is she?" Zhongli looked at me. "She stayed up late waiting for you to return. She is likely still exhausted." I felt a warmth in my chest. "Silly girl." I shook my head and smiled. "Then let's head out, old friend." We pushed open the doors of the Wangxing funeral parlor and walked toward Liuli Pavilion. Liyue Harbor was already coming to life. Street vendors were setting up their stalls. The air was filled with the sounds of birds chirping and merchants shouting their morning greetings. Because of the recent chaos at the Rite of Dissension, squads of Millilith guards were still patrolling the streets. As Zhongli and I walked side by side, we drew a lot of attention. I heard the local women whispering as we passed. "Look, it's the consultants from the funeral parlor. They're walking together. They're both so handsome and scholarly." I glanced at Zhongli. He looked like a statue, composed, steady, and unmoving. I couldn't help but think to myself that he acted like an old man. I wondered why Morix didn't just take the form of an elderly person. It would definitely suit his personality better. Suddenly, a young woman blocked our path. It was Ku Qing, the Yuheng of the Liyue Qixing. She looked small standing before us, but her voice was sharp and powerful. "Consultants, may I have a moment of your time?" she asked. I gave her a polite smile. "Is something wrong, Lady Yuheng?" Ku Qing looked at both of us. She told us that Ning Guang had heard of our vast knowledge. She wanted us to come to the Jade Chamber to work as advisors for the Qixing. The crowd around us gasped. In Liyue, even a scrap of paper falling from the Jade Chamber was worth a fortune. Being invited up there personally was a massive honor. Ku Qing looked a bit flustered standing in front of two tall, handsome men, but she kept her professional smile. Zhongli didn't even blink. "I am used to a life of leisure," he said smoothly. "Strolling with birds and admiring flowers suits me better than a government office. Perhaps you should ask my friend." I almost laughed. If he went to work for Ning Guang, he'd lose his retirement lifestyle. Ku Qing looked at him with a mix of respect and annoyance. She probably thought he was wasting his life while the archons of the past worked so hard for Liyue. She turned to me. "And what about you, Master Qiubai? Once I finish my current business, I'll certainly pay a visit to the Jade Chamber," I said. Ku Qing smiled, clearly thinking I was more reasonable than Zhongli. She told me to find her assistants at Yujing Terrace when I was ready. Then she hurried off to continue her city planning. The local merchants tried to swarm us after she left, hoping to get close to people invited by the Qixing, but we moved quickly. We reached the entrance of Liuli Pavilion in no time. Two employees bowed deeply as we approached. "Master de Lia has been waiting for you," they said. "Please, come in." We walked into the private room. A young man was sitting at the table. He wore the clothes of a wealthy noble, but his eyes were flat, lacking the light of a normal person. It was Child. He stood up with a smile, but I could see the curiosity in his gaze. I knew I was a mystery to the Fatui. I had appeared out of nowhere and was already close friends with Zhongli. "Master Qiubai, Master Zhongli, please sit," Child said. "One more guest hasn't arrived yet. I'll go bring them in." He stepped out of the room. Zhongli and I sat down and poured some tea. We didn't touch the food. In Liyue, it was disrespectful to start eating before everyone arrived. A few minutes later, the door opened. Child returned with a blonde girl in strange, elegant clothing. A small, floating fairy followed close behind her. It was Ying and Pai Meng. Pai Meng flew right up to my face, her eyes wide. "Qiubai, what are you doing here?" Ying looked just as shocked. "I didn't expect to see you at this dinner," she said, giving me a warm smile. I waved at them. "Hey there, traveler. It's good to see you again." "Long time no see," I said, waving my hand with a smile. Child looked between us, his grin widening. "Oh, so Master Qiubai and the traveler are already acquainted? That makes things much easier. It's always better to work with friends." He turned to Zhongli, gesturing toward him. "Let me introduce you. This is Master Zhongli, a consultant at the Wangxing funeral parlor. Like Master Chiu Bai, he is a man of the road. Ing looked hesitant, her eyes darting between us. A man of the road? Is it the kind of road I'm thinking of? Exactly that kind, I said, biting back a laugh. Ing and Pai Ming jumped, looking at me like I was some kind of underworld boss. They clearly hadn't expected me to be involved in that kind of business. Child leaned in, his voice dropping as he looked at Ing. In Liyue, a business like Wangxing inevitably deals with certain underground matters. And we Fatui, well, we always enjoy working with friends who walk in the shadows. Pai Ming looked like she was about to cry. Walking in the shadows? Zhongli remained perfectly calm, his expression unreadable. A pleasure to meet you both. I have heard of your exploits in Mondstadt. The girls were frozen. Shadows. The underworld. Sending people to the afterlife. It finally clicked for them, and I could see the hairs standing up on their arms. They had forgotten to ask me what Wangxing actually did back when we first met. Wait. Pai Ming stammered, covering her mouth. Is Wangxing a group of... Yes, Zhongli interrupted, his voice steady. Exactly as you suspect. Pai Ming trembled, her eyes wide with fear. Wangxing is an organization that manages funeral rites. Zhongli continued. We aim to send people peacefully to the next life. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I burst out laughing, the sound echoing through the private room. Ing and Pai Ming turned to me, their fear turning into pure annoyance. You did that on purpose. Ing pouted, looking at me with her cheeks puffed out. You just wanted to see us freak out. Pai Ming crossed her arms, glaring. You're a jerk, Chiu Bai. All right, I said, waving a hand to calm them down. I'm sorry. Your faces were just too funny. Child chuckled softly beside me. Did you really think they were assassins? Some of my Fatui friends are, but Wangxing doesn't do that. At least, not officially. He paused, his expression turning serious as he glanced at Zhongli. Anyway, the reason I brought you here is because I have a way for you to see the body of the Geo Archon. Ing and Pai Ming gasped at the same time. Don't be so surprised, Child said. Ningguang has hidden the body away, but listen to what Zhongli has to say. I looked at Child and felt a bit bad for him. He was being played like a fiddle by Zhongli and Signora, and he didn't even know it. Zhongli spoke up, his voice deep and resonant. Rex Lapis may be the ancestor of all Adepti, but he is still one of them. Throughout Liyue's history, the Adepti have been leaving. It is an inevitable trend. The times have changed. You felt that change in Julian Karst, didn't you? Ing nodded slowly, listening intently. The era of the gods and Adepti is fading, Zhongli said. The era of humans is beginning. In the past, when an Adeptus left, we held a grand ceremony. It is Liyue's tradition. But now, the Qixing don't even have time for that. It's disgraceful. I watched him perform. The man was a master actor. He was literally planning his own funeral, and he sounded so indignant about it. I had to admit, he was the ultimate grandmaster of this game. It's a murder case involving a god, Ing reminded him. Yes, Pai Ming added. They haven't even caught the killer yet. Zhongli waved that off with a dismissive hand. Wangxing doesn't care about the murder. We care about the ceremony. If the rite of dissension was so grand, how can the rite of parting be ignored? My lip twitched. You really want a fancy send-off for yourself, don't you? Zhongli turned to Ing. Traveler, I heard about your situation from Child. Since you have some history with the Anemo Archon, would you consider helping me prepare the rite of parting for Rex Lapis? Ing hesitated, looking down at the table. Think about it, Traveler, Pai Ming whispered. We don't really have any other choice. Child chimed in quickly. She's right. Ningguang is blocking everyone from seeing the body. If you want to find the seven, this is your only path. He was desperate for her help. He thought Ing was his key to getting the Gnosis. It was almost tragic. The two gods she was looking for, the Geo Archon and the Yin-Yang Immortal, were sitting right in front of her, explaining how to bury themselves. I guess there's no other way, Ing sighed. Good, Zhongli said. If you agree, follow me after dinner. We can discuss the details on the way. Zhongli stood up and walked out of the room to wait for us. Pai Ming flew over to me immediately. Chiu Bai, I can't believe you work for a place like that. You really scared us. I told you I was a consultant. I laughed, leaning back in my chair. Come on, let's eat first. This food is expensive. Don't let it go to waste. I'll take you to see Zhongli once we're done. Child sat back down, picking up his chopsticks awkwardly. I was hoping to practice my grip anyway. Master Chiobai, care to join me for a few drinks? Of course, I replied. We sat there for a while, eating and drinking. I even gave Child a few tips on how to use his chopsticks. He seemed like a decent guy, honestly. If we weren't from different nations and opposing sides, I think we could have been real friends. He was much more down-to-earth than Zhongli. Time slipped by as we chatted. Finally, Pai Ming patted her stomach and let out a satisfied sigh. I'm stuffed. Thanks for the food. Ing smiled at Child and me as we finished our meal. I pushed my chair back and stood up. It was time to get moving. Let's head out then, I said, looking at Ing and Paimon. I'll take you to find Zhongli. Child, we'll take our leave for now. I glanced over at Child, who was still struggling with his grip. He looked incredibly focused, staring down those wooden sticks like they were an elite enemy. Chopsticks are so hard to use, he muttered under his breath. I couldn't help but twitch my lips, trying to suppress a laugh. Seeing a high-ranking Fatui harbinger defeated by 2 pieces of wood was a sight I wouldn't forget. Leaving him to his battle, I led Ing and Paimon out of the room. We walked through the streets for a few minutes until I spotted a familiar figure standing beneath a large tree. Zhongli was staring out at the distant mountains, his posture as steady as the earth itself. Zhongli, I called out softly as we approached. I brought them. Zhongli turned around slowly, his gaze landing on me first before shifting to Ing and Paimon. Thank you, old friend. Paimon's eyes went wide, her head darting between the two of us. Old friend? That sounds like you've known each other for a really, really long time. She looked skeptical. Both of us looked young, after all. Even if we had grown up together, old friend felt like a heavy term to use. Chiobai and I have known each other for a very long time indeed, Zhongli explained with a faint, knowing smile. Calling him an old friend is only natural. I nodded in agreement. If she only knew how many centuries that long time actually covered. The way you two talk, it feels so old-fashioned, Paimon said, crossing her arms and putting on her best detective face. And Chiobai has those weird techniques. You guys are super suspicious. Ing nodded beside her. She had a keen intuition. She could tell that our calmness wasn't an act. It was the kind of composure that only came from living through countless eras. To her, I seemed somewhat normal, but Zhongli gave off the vibe of someone who had existed since the beginning of time. I laughed it off, reaching out to pat Paimon's head. I don't think I'm that old-fashioned. Maybe it's just because I'm standing next to him. Hey, stop rubbing Paimon's head. She stomped her feet in the air, dodging my hand with an annoyed pout. I turned back to Zhongli, my expression turning a bit more serious. Zhongli, I'm going to head out first. I have an appointment to keep at the Jade Chamber. The Jade Chamber? Ing asked, her eyes widening. You mean that massive building floating in the sky? In this world, the Jade Chamber was even more imposing than I remembered, nearly 4 times the size of how it appeared in the stories. It was a true marvel of engineering and magic. Indeed, Zhongli said. That is the palace built by Ning Guang, the Tian Quan of the Liu Qixing. Earlier, the Yuheng, Kuqing, came to find us. She invited us up. I declined, but my old friend here expressed an interest in seeing it. Paimon huffed, still sore about her hair being messed up. Wow, the Tian Quan invited you personally? I didn't think Chiobai was that important. Hey, do I really look that unreliable? I rubbed my nose, smiling at her antics. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll get your invitation eventually. I'll see you later. I waved goodbye and started walking toward the base of the mountain where the ascent to the Jade Chamber began. Kuqing had told me to look for a man named Buyun and give him a specific password. Safe travels, old friend, Zhongli called out. He watched me until I disappeared around the corner. Then, he turned his attention back to Ing. Now then, let us begin the preparations for the rite of parting. Traveler, now that you have seen a city whose god has departed, how do you feel about Liyue? Ing looked around at the bustling harbor, the blue sky, and the elegant architecture. I like it here. It's cozy, and the food is amazing. Zhongli smiled thinly. Liyue has 3,700 years of history. Among the 7 nations, its roots are the deepest. Organizing this ceremony will become a part of your journey, a way to broaden your horizons. He began walking, his voice steady. Liyue is the most prosperous nation, governed by both gods and the Qixing. That is why the Fatui find it so difficult to operate here. They are constantly watched. I suspect that is why Child wants to use the Wangxing funeral parlor's connections to get things done. But what does Child get out of helping us with the funeral? Paimon asked, tilting her head. I do not know, nor do I care to know, Zhongli replied. To me, the Fatui are simply providing the funding. My only wish is that the traditions of Liyue are not forgotten. He pulled a heavy bag of mora from his coat. This is the first installment of the funds Child provided. If we run out, we can simply ask for more. Now let us move. The first step is to find Noctilucus jade of a quality fit for a god. While Zhongli was guiding the traveler, Ningguang was standing on the edge of the jade chamber, looking down at the world. She held a stack of reports in her hand, her mind racing. She hadn't expected the consultant from the funeral parlor to actually accept her invitation. There was something about this Chiu Bai that bothered her. Her informants, including the boss of Wangshu Inn, had sent back puzzling reports. With the Geo Archon gone and the Adepti's attitude uncertain, the pressure on her was immense. To make matters worse, she knew of at least 3 Fatui harbingers in the city, Signora, Child, and a third one she hadn't identified yet. She needed allies, or at least, she needed to know where everyone stood. I reached the pavilion at the base of the mountain and found the man Kaching had mentioned. Can I help you? Buyan asked, looking me over. Hello, I said, giving him the code. Do you sell moons here? Buyan's professional mask broke into a smile. Ah, a friend of Lady Ningguang. Please, follow me. He led me to a large piece of floating plaisir. I stepped onto the stone platform, and with a low hum of elemental energy, it began to rise. The ground shrank away until the entire harbor looked like a miniature model. When I stepped off onto the jade chamber, the wind was much stronger. I looked around the opulent deck and saw Ningguang standing near the railing. She sensed my arrival and turned, walking toward me with a graceful smile. Master Chiu Bai, it has been a while, she said. It has, Lady Ningguang, I replied, squinting against the bright midday sun. It's quite windy up here. It's easy to catch a cold in this wind, Ningguang said, her voice smooth and welcoming. Please, follow me inside so we can talk. I followed her gaze. She was smiling, but I could tell she was observing me closely. She hadn't had a chance to really look at me before. Now, up close, I could see the slight flicker of surprise in her eyes. I knew I looked the part of a refined gentleman, but to someone like Ningguang, appearance was just one layer of the puzzle. She had met countless young elites, yet she seemed genuinely comfortable with my presence. Then I'll accept your hospitality, Lady Ningguang, I said, looking around the interior. This is my first time here. It really is like a palace. I wasn't exaggerating. Looking at the intricate carvings and the sheer scale of the structure floating in the clouds, I couldn't help but admire her. I knew her history. She had started as a little girl walking barefoot along the coast, selling her wares. Now, she sat atop the world. To achieve this much in a single human lifetime was nothing short of incredible. I am honored by your praise, Ningguang replied, leading the way. We entered her main office. The room was elegant and spacious, scented with a light, mysterious incense. In the center sat a model of Liyue Harbor, and near the window stood a massive chalkboard covered in slips of paper. Those were the secrets of Liyue, business intelligence, future blueprints, and political moves. Ningguang moved to a table and began to pour tea. Her movements were fluid and graceful. Her long silver gold hair was pinned back with a black and gold hairpin, a red tassel dangling against her forehead. Every detail of her attire, from the white fur stole to her intricate qipao, screamed authority and elegance. Please sit, she said, gesturing to a chair. Don't mind if I do. I sat down and took a sip of the tea. It was exceptional, far better than anything I'd tasted at Lily Pavilion. I set the cup down and looked her in the eye. But I suspect you didn't invite me here just for tea or to discuss a job offer. Ningguang paused, a hint of surprise crossing her face. She hadn't expected me to be so direct. Do you already know why I asked you here? I do, I said plainly. Otherwise, a wanderer like me wouldn't have come. I will tell you this much. Everything you have done so far is correct. I cannot speak for the other Adepti, but I am satisfied. The room went quiet. I had just essentially admitted my identity. I hadn't told her exactly which immortal I was, but the message was clear. I was one of the ancient ones. Ningguang murmured to herself, "Everything I've done is correct?" "I have one request," I added. "Do not tell anyone who I am, not even the other adepti. When the time is right, I will reveal myself." I knew the pressure she was under. With the Geo Archon dead, the Fatui were pushing boundaries everywhere. Signora had already taken the Anemo Archon's Gnosis in Mondstadt, and Ningguang was trying to prevent a similar disaster here. She was hiding the Exuvia in the Golden House and buying time for the Qixing to take full control of Liyue. Meanwhile, Zhongli, that old actor, was busy focusing on tradition while the world burned around him. Ningguang's lips curled into a small smile. "So, should I call you Master Qiubai, or should I address you as an immortal?" "I'm not like those old, stiff-necked fellows," I laughed, waving my hand. "Just call me Qiubai. It's fine." "Then, Qiubai," she said, her expression turning serious. "What did you mean when you said my actions are correct? Even the Qixing's attempt to replace the gods. Is that correct too?" "Yes," I said, taking another sip of tea. "Completely. From the moment you started observing the traveler to everything you've planned since. It's the right path. However, Liyue as a whole has not yet handed in a satisfying answer. And by Liyue, I mean the Qixing, the people, and the adepti together." Ningguang looked stunned. She realized I knew much more than I let on. I knew about her surveillance of the traveler. I knew her hidden motives. "Thank you for clearing my doubts," she said softly. "I will keep your secret." I nodded, and before she could say another word, I vanished. I left her alone in the silence of the Jade Chamber to think. She immediately called for her 3 secretaries, Bai Wan, Bai Shi, and Bai Xiao, to give them a new order: find the 3rd Fatui Harbinger. A moment later, I reappeared in the outskirts of Liyue. The air here was thick with the scent of smoke. I sensed a battle nearby. I moved toward the noise and found Xiangling and Guoba. They were surrounded by 3 massive stone-hide lawchurls. The grass was already scorched black from Xiangling's flames, and the fire was spreading fast. "Xiangling," I called out as I flashed into existence right in front of her. "Setting fire to the mountain is a crime, you know." Qiubai." She jumped, clutching her chest with one hand and her spear with the other. "You scared the life out of me. Get back, it's dangerous." One of the lawchurls roared and leaped into the air, aiming to crush us both like insects. "Don't worry," I said calmly. I raised a single finger. A ripple of white light surged outward. In an instant, the 3 massive monsters dissolved into black dust and vanished. The light didn't stop there. It washed over the blackened earth, and the charred grass instantly turned lush and green again. Xiangling and Guoba both stared at me, their eyes wide and jaws dropped. "That was incredible," Xiangling whispered. She beamed at me, her fear replaced by pure wonder. "Thank you, Qiubai. You're amazing." Xiangling was still frozen in shock from what I'd just done. After a moment, she finally snapped out of it and thanked me profusely. I waved it off with a smile. I told her I was just out for a walk and didn't expect to find her cornered by monsters. I looked down at Guoba. The little fellow was still staring at me, completely stunned. I chuckled softly. It seemed my little display of power had impressed him too. I have to admit, showing off felt pretty good. Xiangling rubbed the back of her head, looking a bit embarrassed. She explained that she had come out to find ingredients for a new recipe she was developing. She hadn't expected to run into 3 stone-hide lawchurls at once. Even though she was trained by street ward Rambler herself, facing 3 of those brutes was a tall order. I noticed the massive backpack she was wearing. It had a large cooking pot strapped to the side. I asked her what kind of ingredients she was looking for. Her eyes lit up instantly. She told me she was hunting slimes. Apparently, different elemental slimes added unique textures to her dishes, except for geo slimes, because they were way too hard to chew. My mouth twitched. Slime cuisine? That was a new one. Before I could say anything, Xiangling grabbed my hand. She begged me to come along and help her find more, promising that I'd be the first to taste her new creation. Her gaze was intense and full of passion. Guoba even waddled over to my feet, making little cheering noises. I held up my hands and took a step back, laughing. It was impossible to say no to a girl that enthusiastic. Besides, I had the body of an immortal. Surely I could handle some experimental cooking. Maybe it would even taste good. All right, let's go, I said. Xiangling cheered and put away her spear. We set off into the wilds with Guoba bouncing ahead of us. She yelled at him to use his nose, but warned him not to lead us into another nest of law churls. Guoba looked up at her with big, pitiful eyes, and her heart immediately melted. She knelt down, patted his head, and promised him some delicious Jin Guoba once we found the slimes. Watching them, I couldn't help but feel a bit nostalgic. I looked at the little orange bear and sighed. To think the mighty Marcosius, the god of the stove, had lost his intelligence and ended up like this. Still, seeing him so happy, maybe this wasn't such a bad fate for him. It didn't take long to find what we were looking for. Down by a river, we spotted a group of hydro and cryo slimes. Xiangling didn't hesitate. She charged in, shouting about showing off her master's spear techniques. I watched her fight, noticing how she used her pyro vision to trigger vaporize reactions. It was impressive in a chaotic sort of way. She came running back a few minutes later, grinning from ear to ear, holding a chunk of hydro slime condensate. We kept moving, and over the next few hours, she managed to collect samples from 6 different elements. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. At one point, Guoba led us straight to a massive, flaming Regis vine. If I hadn't been there, Xiangling might have been in serious trouble. But instead of running, she had the insane idea to pluck one of its glowing leaves to see if it was edible. I had to literally grab her and pull her back before she got herself roasted. I almost punched the plan into dust just to save us the headache. Eventually, we found a small campsite as evening began to fall. Xiangling unpacked her bag, revealing an incredible array of spices and kitchen tools. She was definitely prepared. She set her pot over the fire and had Guoba light the wood with a quick breath of flames. She turned to me, looking a bit shy, and asked if I could go fetch some water from the nearby river. I took the container she gave me and headed off. As I reached the riverbank, I felt a strange ripple in the air. I closed my eyes and spread my divine sense across the area. A thin smile touched my lips. I had found a rat hiding in the shadows. It was Dator, the second of the Fatui harbingers. I wondered if he was here because of me. Liyue was currently crawling with 3 different harbingers, but as long as they didn't interfere with my plans or Morix's, I didn't care. However, if they dared to hurt the people of Liyue, I would show them no mercy. My gaze turned cold as ice. On a distant hilltop, Dator suddenly froze. Even though it was a warm evening, he broke out in a cold sweat. A crushing, overwhelming pressure had settled onto his shoulders for a split second before vanishing just as quickly. He stood there in the forest, trembling slightly. His subordinates, a few Fatui skirmishers and a mirror maiden, looked at him in confusion. They asked if something was wrong, but Dator remained silent, his face hidden behind his mask. The mirror maiden grew annoyed with the recruits whispering and slapped them both across the face, telling them to shut up. The 2 soldiers clutched their swollen cheeks, looking completely bewildered as their master stared into the distance, haunted by a power he couldn't explain. Do you know how much psychological damage a slap like that can do to a seasoned Sneznan soldier? One of the recruits, a heavy-set guy, was about to complain about wanting some berries, but he shut his mouth the second he saw Dr. Dator. The air around Dator was heavy. It was a suffocating pressure I had only ever felt from the Tsaritsa herself. Dator muttered something under his breath. For a split second, he truly believed this specific segment of himself was about to be erased from existence. He wondered if a god was watching him. But even if this body was destroyed, he had to get his hands on that object. A twisted, manic smile spread across his face. He wasn't afraid. His main body and his most powerful segments weren't even in Liyue. He looked back at the trembling subordinates behind him, his smile vanishing as he turned and walked deeper into the woods. The Fatui scrambled to follow. On the other side of the mountain, I didn't give Dator another thought. I carried the water back toward the campfire. Thin trails of smoke drifted into the evening sky, the orange glow of the flames dancing across Xiangling's face as she sat with Guoba. Mr. Qiubai, you're back. Xiangling stood up and greeted me with a bright smile. Here is the water you asked for, I said, handing her the container with a small nod. Then let's get started. I'm going to try out a few new recipes, she chirped. She immediately began tossing ingredients into her pot. She used her vision to swirl the water and hydro slime condensate together, moving with a chaotic energy that was honestly a bit dizzying to watch. One dish followed another in a blur of steam and spices. Eventually, she presented me with several bowls of something. They were all quite slimy. Please, Mr. Chiobai, give them a try. She beamed, placing the dishes in front of me one by one. She started introducing them with a proud look in her eyes. This is hydro slime boiled punlai tofu. This one is pyro slime stir-fried julienne chili. Oh, and over here we have cryo slime dry-fried fish and a cryo slime salad. My eyelid twitched as I looked at the colorful, wobbling messes. Except for the salad, which looked somewhat edible, the names alone were enough to make a man lose his appetite. I sighed internally. If I don't go to hell to test this, who will? With a silent prayer, I picked up my chopsticks and took a bite of each. Xiang Ling watched me with wide, expectant eyes. To my absolute shock, it wasn't bad. In fact, it was actually delicious. Her talent for cooking was so great that she had somehow turned slime condensate into a gourmet experience. I savored the flavors for a moment, but before I could give her a compliment, my stomach did a somersault. The different elemental energies were clashing inside me. It felt like a small explosion was waiting to happen in my gut. Of course, for someone of my power, this was a minor inconvenience. I quietly suppressed the elemental riot within my body and looked at her. Well? She asked, leaning in. It's very good, I told her. Especially the cryo slime salad. It's refreshing, like jelly. But Xiang Ling, listen to me. Never let a customer eat more than 3 of these dishes at once. The elemental conflict in the stomach could lead to an accident. Oh, I see. Thank you, Mr. Chiobai. I'll remember that. She took a bite herself and nodded, her eyes lighting up as she realized I was right about the taste. Then, she got a mischievous look on her face. She turned toward Guoba. The little bear saw her expression and immediately looked terrified, taking a step back. Poor Guoba. It looked like he had been the test subject for many strange experiments in the past. I guess I need to refine these so they aren't dangerous to the customers, Xiang Ling said happily. Thank you so much for the help. If you're ever hungry, come to Wanmin Restaurant. It's on the house. Generally speaking, I don't really get hungry. But who can say no to a free meal? I appreciate that, Xiang Ling. It's getting late. We should head back to Liyue Harbor. It's okay, Mr. Chiobai. I'm used to being out in the wild by myself. Sometimes I don't go home for 3 days when I'm looking for new ingredients. I looked toward the distant peak where the Fatui were lurking. Just remember, Xiang Ling, do not go toward that mountain over there. It's dangerous. She looked confused but saw the serious expression on my face and nodded. I understand. I won't go that way. We said our goodbyes. I watched her for a moment, noticing her eyes wandering toward a nearby Regis vine. She looked like she wanted to see if its leaves were edible. Her eyes were practically sparkling with hunger. I had to physically pull her back before she tried to garnish a salad with a monster's leaf. Guobao waved his little paws at me as they finally headed off. Still a bit worried, I handed her a small jade charm shaped like a Taiji diagram. It glowed with a faint, warm light. If you run into real trouble, just crush this. She took it, looking at my back as I walked away. I think she saw me as a sort of teacher or an older brother figure. I didn't head back to the city, though. Once I was out of her sight, I vanished. I reappeared on a high mountain peak. I had felt a strange ripple in the air, an aura that felt remarkably similar to my own. In my current state, it was hard to pinpoint the exact location, but I had a lead. I let out a soft breath and allowed my form to shift. My silhouette blurred and changed until I stood there as a woman of ethereal beauty. My eyes were a cool, distant blue, and I wore a long robe of flowing black and white. At my waist, the half of my Taiji jade glowed with a brilliant, dark light. My long black hair was pinned back, and my bare feet rested lightly on the cold stone. I looked like a celestial being who had stepped out of a painting, ready to find whatever was calling to me in the dark. The air around me felt different, heavy with a sacred authority that felt impossible to touch. I stood about 5'7", but everything about me had changed. I wasn't just a man anymore. I had shifted into my female form. This was the other half of my power as the demon god of yin and yang. It was only the second time I had ever accessed this state. Even my old friend Morix had never seen me like this. Honestly, I hated doing it. This form altered my personality and my senses in ways that made me uneasy. I looked down and felt the weight on my chest. I reached up, touching the two soft slimes resting there, and felt my face grow hot. "Is this really me?" I whispered. My voice had changed too. It was sweet and crisp, ringing out like a silver bell in the mountain air. I shook my head to clear my thoughts and took flight, soaring toward a specific direction I felt calling to me. I scanned the horizon until I spotted a massive crater. Trees grew thick around its edges, and I could see animals scurrying through the brush below. I descended toward the center. This was the exact spot where I had purged the dark energy from Azdaha 1,000 years ago. I landed softly and reached out with my senses, frowning. Before I could investigate further, the ground buckled. A ball of white light shot out from the dirt, streaking into the sky at incredible speed. "Don't you run," I shouted. I took off after it. I could feel it. That light was the seed of a new demon god. We raced higher and higher into the clouds, but I was faster. I reached out a hand and snatched the glowing orb out of the air. It struggled, vibrating against my palm for a few seconds before going still. I stared at it. This was my own origin energy, lost during the purification of the Dragon King. Over 1,000 years, it had actually begun to manifest its own sentience. "Thank goodness," I muttered, watching the moonlight hit my pale skin. "It hasn't developed a personality yet. Otherwise, I'd practically be a mother." I stopped, my heart skipping a beat. I felt my face flush deep red again. No, that was impossible. I wasn't going to be anyone's mother. This form was definitely messing with my head. "It's just instinct," I told myself, looking back at the orb. It was running because it wanted to survive. Well, it's time to come home. I didn't want any witnesses, so I flew to a remote, desolate mountain range and found a quiet cave. I sat cross-legged on the cold floor and released the orb. I began to draw the energy back into my body, watching as black and white light filled the dark cavern. Time slipped away. By the time I opened my eyes, the morning sun was beginning to peek over the horizon. The orb was gone. I checked my internal strength. It hadn't increased by much, maybe half of what I was a millennium ago, but every bit counted. Even a mosquito has meat, right? I stood up, stretched my limbs, and walked out into the fresh morning air. The sunlight felt warm on my face. It was time to find the traveler. She was likely still with Morix. I focused on her aura and vanished. I reappeared a short distance away from where Zhongli, Ying, and Paimon were standing. They were gathered around a statue of the Seven, offering different types of incense. I stayed back for a moment, watching them. The statue reacted strongly to the third type of incense they offered. "Looks like Rex Lapis really likes the third one," Paimon squeaked, her voice carrying over to me. Ying nodded. "I didn't expect the god of Geo to have such tastes. Do you think Rex Lapis was actually a mature older sister type?" Zhongli chuckled. "Perhaps. Rex Lapis has taken thousands of forms. It is entirely possible such an image existed. Too bad we only saw that giant dragon," Paimon sighed. "I just hope the Liu Qixing find the real killer soon." "Leave those worries to the authorities," Zhongli said calmly, crossing his arms. "Our job is to complete the rite of parting. We have finished another step. As for the next..." I decided it was time to step out. "Ying, Paimon, Zhongli, you're all here." My voice was sweet, and as I walked toward them, my long robes fluttered around my legs. Ying and Paimon froze. They stared at me, eyes wide, completely stunned by the woman walking toward them. Beautiful big sister?" Paimon asked, tilting her head. "Do you know us?" My heart sank. I had been so focused on absorbing my energy that I completely forgot to change back to my male form. I awkwardly rubbed my nose, trying to keep a straight face. I had to commit to the bit now. Zhongli's expression, usually a mask of stone, finally cracked. His eyes were wide with genuine shock as he stared at me. I am, I stammered. Zhongli cleared his throat, stepping in to break the tension. "She is a friend of mine. I have told her about your travels, which is why she recognizes you." I jumped on the excuse immediately. "Right? Yes. Zhongli told me all about the traveler and Paimon." I walked closer, my bare feet hitting the grass. Zhongli was still staring at me, his mind clearly racing. He could tell it was really me, but he had no idea I could, or would, take this shape. As I stepped near the statue of the seven, something strange happened. The statue, which had only reacted once to the incense, started pulsing with light every few seconds. It was like it was vibrating with excitement. What's wrong with the statue? Paimon asked, looking confused. It just won't stop glowing. Ing looked at the statue, then at me, then back at the statue. Zhongli's lip twitched. He looked at the frantic statue and then looked away, awkwardly rubbing his fingers together as if he didn't want to admit why the divine stone was suddenly losing its mind. I quietly suppressed the light from the statue while Ing and Paimon weren't looking. I couldn't have the divine stone giving me away just yet. Zhongli has mentioned you both to me, I said, offering a soft smile to the traveler and her floating companion. I didn't expect to run into you here. As I spoke, I let a gentle radiance wash over my features. Paimon and Ing both froze, staring at me with wide eyes. They looked completely dazed. Big sister, Paimon stammered, her tiny feet kicking the air. You're so pretty. You're way prettier than anyone Paimon has ever seen. Ing nodded her head frantically in agreement. I couldn't help but chuckle. I'm honored to receive such high praise from the famous traveler and little Paimon, I said. I reached out and gently patted Paimon's head. To my surprise, she didn't dodge. Usually, she was quite protective of her personal space, but now she leaned into my hand, closing her eyes with a blissful expression like a kitten asking for more. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. It seemed my disguise was working perfectly. Then, a realization hit me. Whenever I tried to pat Paimon's head in my male form, she would complain or fly away. Now she was practically begging for it. I felt a twitch in the corner of my mouth. Did Paimon really have such a blatant bias for beautiful big sisters? Was everyone in Teyvat like this? Ing wasn't any better. She stepped forward, looking at me with puppy dog eyes. Big sister, me too. She leaned her head toward me, and I gave a soft laugh, reaching out to ruffle her hair with a gentle touch. Ing looked like she had just found a new treasure, and I could almost see the gears turning in her head about adding me to her traveling party permanently. What's your name, big sister? Paimon asked, her curiosity finally winning out. I paused. What should I call myself? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I looked at their expectant faces and placed a finger against my lips, striking a playful pose. It's a secret, I whispered. I'll tell you both later, okay? I rested my hands over my stomach, trying to look composed and elegant. I realized my personality was shifting. The longer I stayed in this female form, the more my gestures and speech patterns were being influenced. I needed to change back soon before I lost my old self entirely. Okay, then Paimon will just call you pretty big sister for now. Paimon chirped. Ing nodded, though she looked a bit suspicious. She probably wondered why such a stunning woman was hanging out with Zhongli, who she and Paimon already viewed as a refined but penniless social parasite. I turned my attention to the man in question. Zhongli, it's been a long time. I caught him staring again. He looked utterly bewildered. His rock-solid composure was crumbling as he tried to reconcile the image of his old war comrade with the graceful woman standing before him. I could tell his heart, usually as cold as stone, had skipped a beat. Old friend, Zhongli finally replied, his voice low. He decided to play along for now, likely planning to interrogate me the moment we were alone. I walked up to him. Because of my current height, I had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. A soft breeze blew past, carrying a faint, divine fragrance from my hair toward him. Behind me, the statue of the seven started pulsing again like it was at a dance club. Paimon flew over, circling me like a tiny detective. Wait, Paimon figured it out. The statue keeps reacting because pretty big sister smells so good. Ing leaned in, sniffing the air. She's right. It's a wonderful scent. No wonder even the Geo Archon would be a fan. Zhongli's expression became incredibly strained. He looked at me, then at the statue, his face twitching. I could tell he was questioning everything. Was I really Bai? Or did Bai have a twin sister he never knew about? I saw his confusion and leaned in close, pressing a finger to my lips. Don't think too hard, Zhongli. It's me, I whispered. He let out a long breath, finally accepting the truth. This was indeed his old friend, the god of yin and yang, more shu. Thanks to the system, my power had surged tenfold, making me nearly as strong as Morix was in his prime. I could manipulate the power of Yin to destroy souls, or the power of Yang to purify and heal. Most importantly, with this level of strength, I could finally do the impossible. I could bring people back to life. We are currently organizing the rite of parting, Zhongli said, regaining his professional tone. Would you like to join us, my friend? I looked at Ing and Paimon. They were both staring at me with sparkling eyes, clearly hoping I would say yes. Seeing their excitement, I couldn't really say no. After all, a lot had changed in 500 years, and I wanted to see what kind of world my friends had built. Ing and Paimon were staring at me with those big, sparkling eyes, clearly waiting for the pretty big sister to say something. I rubbed my temples, feeling a bit of a headache coming on. My original plan was to find a secluded spot and change back into my male form, but I didn't have the heart to turn them down. Since I was stuck in this body for now, I decided to lean into it. I even had a name picked out, Qiu Shui. All right, Zhongli, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I accept your invitation. I gave the girls a warm smile. I'll accompany you on this journey. Yay! Paimon cheered, stomping her little feet in the air. Let's go then, pretty big sister. She started to fly forward, but then she froze mid-air, a blank look crossing her face. Wait, where are we supposed to go again? Ing sighed, face-palming at Paimon's short memory. She turned her gaze toward Zhongli. Since my friend has accepted, Zhongli said, his voice calm and steady. Let us head to our next destination together. I noticed he had swapped old friend for just friend to keep up appearances. I tilted my head, keeping a gentle smile on my face as I stared him down. Zhongli felt my gaze and cleared his throat, looking away uncomfortably. Old friend? He tried again, testing the waters. He seemed genuinely confused by why I was looking at him like that. I didn't say a word. I just gave him a sweet, sugary smile. It was the kind of look that could make even the king of hell lose his composure, let alone the two girls standing behind me. I can't believe it, Paimon muttered, looking back and forth between us. It was one thing for Qiu Bai to be your old friend, but this pretty sister too? How does a social loafer who never pays for anything have such mysterious and powerful friends? Zhongli gave a composed, professional laugh. We were fortunate enough to meet years ago. We became close despite the age gap. I let out a soft giggle and nodded along. Then Zhongli must know her name, right? Paimon asked. Ing looked at him expectantly. Zhongli's jaw tightened. He was stuck. He couldn't call me Morix, and he certainly couldn't call me the Lord of Yin and Yang or Qiu Bai in front of them. He stood there, completely stumped. Before he could embarrass himself further, I stepped in. Traveler, little Paimon. My name is Qiu Shui. I winked at Zhongli. He had helped me out earlier when I was in a tight spot. Now I was returning the favor. Whoa, you just told us your name just like that. Paimon waved her hands around. A second ago it felt like a total secret. Qiu Shui, that's a beautiful name, Ing said, nodding in approval. I'm telling you because I consider you both friends, I said, smiling. I could feel my personality shifting, becoming softer and more feminine to match this body. Then we're best friends now, Qiu Shui. Ying's eyes took on a strange, mischievous glint. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. She walked right up to me with a look that could only be described as predatory. Qiu Shui, please. Let me touch those long legs. I can't hold back anymore. What? I felt my face flush deep red. Before I could even react, Ying's hands were already on my thighs. So smooth. She giggled, looking like a total creep. Paimon covered her eyes, though she was definitely peeking through the cracks of her fingers. Zhongli immediately turned his back to us, staring intensely at a nearby rock to avoid the scene. Are you done yet? I whispered, looking down at her. Ever since I took this form, I had become incredibly sensitive, and my face turned red at the slightest thing. Ing finally pulled her hands back, looking up at my blushing face. She realized if she kept going, she'd officially be labeled a harasser. Mr. Zhongli, Paimon called out, breaking the awkward silence. What's the next step for the rite of parting? Right. Ing rubbed the back of her head, trying to act normal. I almost forgot the actual work because Qiu Shui's legs were just so. Hey, stop copying me. Paimon stomped her feet. I know the way, I said, regaining my composure. Follow me. Our next stop is Liyue Harbor. Paimon looked surprised. You know the steps for the rite of parting too? Every old soul in Liyue knows the traditions, I explained softly. I started walking toward the harbor, my long legs carrying me gracefully down the path. Ing and Paimon hurried to catch up, but Zhongli stayed behind for a moment. He looked back at the statue of the seven, perhaps seeing a reflection of his younger self. Then, his eyes drifted to my retreating back. For a split second, my silhouette overlapped with a memory from centuries ago. His pupils shrunk. A vision flashed in his mind, a woman in a flowing green dress turning to face him with a gentle smile. Morix, this world of dust, I leave it to you. Her voice echoed in his head, clear and soft. She had reached out, handing him a stone dumbbell, the memory of Guizhong. Zhongli stood frozen, lost in the past. He let out a long, heavy sigh. Mr. Zhongli, what's wrong? Paimon asked, noticing he hadn't moved. I stopped and looked back at my old friend. My heart sank as I saw the look in his eyes. I frowned slightly. Was the erosion of his soul getting worse? Was he losing himself to the weight of his memories? I watched him, worried that even the strongest of us was finally starting to crack.